Okay. Yep. Hope everyone's doing well today. Haven't been able to stream in a while. I've been feeling really sick and tired, so I just haven't really been wanting to stream and whatever. So good now for a little bit. Uh hopefully sometime this weekend we'll start a playthrough of Fire Emblem Engage. But until then, we have some news to go over and stuff. So, Poilievre went to Winnipeg to do like some chatting and propaganda and shit like that. And then we got new uh, recommendations for alcohol consumption. And, we got the Italian police arrested a top mafia boss as well. So, that's cool. So I guess let's just hop into it then. So let's start off with Poilievre shit.
Thank you.
Pierre Poilievre says he's here on the invitation of a conservative MP, standing up for freedom of expression.
Ha,
He said, Pierre, do you believe in free speech?
no.
I said yes. He said, how would you like to give one?
His decision to
God.
appear before this particular think tank is generating criticism from his political opponents.
Playing
Rightfully so.
with a think tank that has taken some pretty extreme right-wing views.
The Frontier Center for Public Policy has published articles questioning climate change and denouncing vaccine mandates. But what seems to be driving a lot of this criticism, radio ads it released in 2018, claiming to debunk myths about residential schools.
What? Okay, that's already a bad look there, Sweaty. Sorry.
Residential schools robbed Indigenous Canadians of their language and culture. In fact, former students of residential schools were more likely to have retained more of their language and traditional culture than those who did not attend.
By not denouncing those views during his appearance, this senator says Poilievre is legitimizing them.
He owes more than an apology. I mean, he should be stepping down from his position.
All those opposed to the motion will please say nay. Carried.
Last fall, New Democrat MP Leah Gazan got the House of Commons to recognize what happened at residential schools as genocide. A unanimous vote.
I mean, it literally was, though.
Poilievre is now undermining.
He's fraternizing with an organization that has led the charge in regards to residential school denialism in this country.
The Frontier Center calls the uproar silly.
What we need to do is be able to listen to each other and understand each other well and not just simply name call people.
In a statement, Poilievre's office
Come on, bro.
Speaking before a group does not mean endorsing its views. It says Poilievre denounces all forms of racism and bigotry, adding that the CBC has faced its own accusations.
But not misogyny. Don't forget that. It's completely fine with misogyny.
Of systemic racism from one of its unions. Olivia Stefanovich, CBC.
You know, like, the funny thing is I don't even believe that.
Okay, well, thanks for sitting down with us. You had a big crowd today at the Frontier Center luncheon. You said that you're a prairie guy at heart. Nice to be back
he's
there.
not.
You see big gains to be made on the prairies.
Absolutely. It's the prairie common sense values that raised me. As I said in my speech,
What a groiper, man.
I was born of a 16-year-old unwed mother who couldn't raise me, so she put me up for adoption to two school teachers, and they always taught me that it didn't matter where I came from, but where I was going, and that's the country I want for my kids. But it's not the country people feel with right now. People feel trapped. It doesn't matter how hard they work. Their paychecks get chewed up by Trudeau's high taxes or the inflation that he's caused.
It's not him.
In fact, they can't afford a home.
It's literally not because of him. It's because of price gouging done by corporations like, say, Loblaws or Shell or wherever. It's not because of the tax rate. Which, yeah, don't get me wrong, the tax rate is high amongst the proletariat in Canada, but it's not because of them.
After 7 years of Trudeau in power, So I want to turn that hurt into hope, and I believe that message of hope will resonate across the prairies where I come from.
You know, you talked about the cost of living. People are just being crushed by this. It doesn't seem to matter where you are in this country. People are feeling it. What would you, I mean, if you're the Prime Minister, could you have avoided this, or what would you be doing if you couldn't avoid it and you're in this position right now? How do you get out of it? What do you do to offer relief other than, you know, throwing government money at people, which you've said that you wouldn't, you don't think that's the answer, right?
Well, the Trudeau government's causing the inflation, the $500 billion of inflation.
No, he's not.
It's a bid up the goods we buy and the interest we pay.
He's literally not. The inflation is happening from multinational corporations. That's where it's coming from. Trudeau has nothing to do with the inflation. It's not his fault that companies are price gouging.
Throwing the money away on CERB payments for prisoners and for dead people, and giving $7 billion more in contracts to high-priced consultants. All that waste is making life more expensive. So I'd cut the waste, cap the spending, and get rid of the Liberal NDP carbon tax. And that's the big disagreement now, of course. The Liberals and NDP.
Okay, so it's interesting that he brought up the carbon tax. What the carbon tax is supposed to do is supposed to wean people off of fossil fuels and carbon-based emissions, right? So, you know, there's going to be a tax there. It's mostly meant for corporations. Generally speaking, the average Canadian consumer will actually benefit more from it than they will be harmed by it, right? It goes after primarily the corporations and people who use a lot of carbon emissions.
Want to triple the carbon tax on your heat, your gas, your groceries. That's going to crush families. I won't allow it. I'm going to get rid of the carbon tax and fight climate change with technology, not taxes.
What sort of technology? What do you
If he says carbon capture, I'm going to laugh at him.
We have a climate crisis. I think everybody kind of agrees with that now. What's the technological escape from that if it's not the carbon tax?
Well, instead of making traditional energy more expensive, we have to make carbon-free alternatives more affordable. So quickly approve more hydroelectric dams to produce emissions-free electricity, approve nuclear power so that we can replace coal-fired plants.
His base is not going to like that.
The oil and gas sector to invest in carbon capture, to capture the carbon in the ground rather than putting it...
No, carbon capture is complete dog shit. It does not work, my guy. Like, anyone who says that carbon capture is not like a fucking scheme is a liar. And anyone who actually has faith in that is a fucking moron.
Into the air and to produce the metals of electrification here in Canada, produce them, the lithium, the cobalt, the graphite for electric car batteries in Canada.
We don't have access to those elements.
We have electric cars that are made in an environmentally friendly way. That's how we're going to make it possible for people to make the switch without driving our working class into miserable poverty, which is what the NDP Liberal Costly Coalition is doing now.
The NDP
you mentioned hydro.
What?
I mean, lots of First Nations communities have been devastated by hydro development in their areas. So there's that. But then also, you know, nuclear power. Are you worried at all? Nobody even has anything to do with the nuclear waste yet. So should we be producing more power when we haven't figured out what to do with the waste?
We should be worrying about fusion now.
Well, Ontario gets half of its energy from nuclear right now. And we have safe disposal.
I don't know if I believe that.
There is, and this is something we have to be very clear about. There is no carbon-free future without nuclear power. That's
not
just
wrong.
a physical and mathematical fact. And because there's no other source that can meet the needs of our civilization. So we have to use clean,
nuclear fission,
safe nuclear power, the way Ontario has been doing, the way France has been doing for decades now. And we can do it.
Yeah, but the thing is like, people like yourself in France have been stripping away their nuclear energy. So it's only a matter of time before you idiots will do the exact same thing.
We have to do it, and that's the way we're going to reduce the emissions from our electrical sector.
But where do you put the waste, though? It's stored right now. There's not really, my understanding is that there's not really an end in sight for like what you do with that stored waste. You can't really store it forever, right?
You can store waste, and you also, there are new technological advancements that leave less waste behind. We need to, there's recent breakthroughs in nuclear fusion. There's small modular reactors. These breakthroughs will be absolutely necessary because the only way to power our future is through hydroelectricity and nuclear power. The other sources, solar and wind, they're fine, but they don't have, they can't have the capacity, and
Wrong.
they're variable. They only power us when the wind blows and the sun shines. We need base load power, and that has to come.
That is wrong. China has half of China's energy comes from green alone. So saying that we can't do it here is idiotic. Like, they have over 1 billion people living in China, and they can do that.
From hydro and nuclear.
I want to switch gears to air travel. I know you, I think everybody, I understand you guys even had your own little bit of hassles with traveling the other day.
Yeah.
You've said, you know, government should be less intrusive in our lives, less
What?
regulation.
Regulations are signed with blood
this
of the
government should have done
worker.
more with the air travel nightmares that we've had. What, I guess, would you have done in similar circumstance if you were the Prime Minister?
Well, first of all, I want to promote more competition in our airline sector. We have very little competition, and that's why the airlines think they can get away with mistreating us. Airlines are federal responsibility. They're federally regulated. Airports are federally mandated. And under Justin Trudeau, our airlines and our airports have been a disaster, an absolute disaster. And we had winter before Justin Trudeau. We didn't have airline catastrophe like we have now.
What?
His total incompetence.
I don't think that
federal responsibilities.
that's really an issue right now, though.
Airports, airlines, passports, immigration backlogs. His total incompetence.
The alleged problems or catastrophe going on with within the airline sector
is harming the lives of everyday people, as we've seen with the catastrophic air service we had. There are 30,000 federal complaints by Canadians against the airlines to Justin Trudeau's transportation agency that are in a backlog. They have to wait 18 months for Trudeau's government to rule on those complaints. No wonder the airlines aren't worried. And meanwhile, the Trudeau government gets no fines out of those companies for having broken their commitments to their customers. And countries around the world have much better, faster, and more affordable airline service than we do in Trudeau's Canada.
What would you want to see him do right now to kind of right that wrong, or to fix it so at least it doesn't happen again? I mean,
well, obviously, Trudeau's got to clear his backlog of 30,000 complaints.
How do you do that?
Well, get your bureaucracy working. He has more bureaucrats working, more bureaucrats getting paid right now, 30,000 more, and yet we can't get passports, can't process airline complaints, can't process immigration. So it's his personal incompetence that means that we're paying more for less. We need a competent Prime Minister with a bureaucracy that actually gets things done to serve the people.
Would you cut the bureaucracy, or you think they just should be working smarter?
I think we can get more productivity out of our government right now. You know, he's spending 70% more on high-priced consultants. That adds up to $7 billion. The total budget for high-priced consultants today, $17 billion. That works out to more than $1,000 for...
The funny thing that he's talking about, is it doesn't really matter, because underneath the Conservatives, the exact same shit happens, if not worse. So, like, yeah. And I wonder if he's going to touch on how all these Conservative premiers are trying to privatize healthcare. I doubt it. But, you know, that's kind of a big issue amongst for Canadians right now.
For every family in Canada. Think about that for a second. Your family is spending $1,000 in federal taxes for Justin Trudeau's high-priced consultants. That's an abject waste of money, and so is his government.
Let's move on to reconciliation then. So I know that had been a big campaign promise of this government. You know, we want to move forward on reconciliation. You've got the Truth and Reconciliation calls to action. That's not moving
like how he disregards
quickly. UNDRIP not moving super quickly. Would there be a change, a shift in direction under
completely like how he disregards the fucking residential schools and says that, you know, they weren't fucking terrible.
Yes, I mean, with Trudeau, it's been a lot of symbolism and speeches and drama. but
Always
no
is
results.
with every politician.
So I would take a different approach. One, we need to get clean drinking water on every reserve in every community. And I would contract the infrastructure companies, and I would say to them, they don't get paid until the clean water is available, and some of their pay will be contingent on.
No, they'll get paid beforehand and then not do anything about it, because that's usually the way that it goes.
Those clean water systems continuing to work for years to come, so they can't build a faulty system, get paid, and buzz off. They have to get the job done to serve, because our First Nations people deserve clean drinking water. Point number 2, the Indian Act is a disaster. It is a racist, colonial hangover that gives all the control to self-serving and incompetent politicians, bureaucrats, and lobbyists in Ottawa, and takes away the control from the First Nations themselves.
He's absolutely right about that.
Easier for First Nations that want to opt out of the Indian Act to do so that they can control their own money, their own land, their own resources, and their own decisions. I believe First Nations know what's good for them, and the problem in this country has been a top-down colonial government in Ottawa that has imposed its will against the will of the First Nations people. And finally, I'm going to make it possible for those First Nations who choose to develop their resources and commerce in their communities to keep the money, rather than having it go to Ottawa and then the people have to go and ask the bureaucrats for their own money back. I want to create a new model that will allow First Nations to keep their money and benefit their people so that they can fulfill their purpose and their destiny, and that's my vision.
There's been, and I'm not sure if there's something you would know about, but there has been some people who have talked about status Indians being able to sign off on their status, just be essentially landlords of the land. Here I get my status card back, and you, as living on this land, would pay me sort of almost a rent. I'm not sure if this is a concept that you've been familiar with. Sheila North had worked on it a little bit. It was kind of hatched here in Winnipeg. But that idea of, it's just kind of another step away from that Indian Act mentality of how Canada and Indigenous people have been forced to, or First Nations people have been forced to live here. Is that something you would think about?
Well, I know there have been a lot of very successful First Nations who do have lease arrangements. So, for example, the Penticton Band has developed wineries and real estate and other commerce with the goal of getting $10 million of revenue per year for their local services, and the Soyuz Band, the First Nations in all across British Columbia, actually.
Those are in prime real estate.
Yeah.
It's a little different if you're living in Garden Hill, right?
Yeah,
maximizing your resources in some of these communities, certainly. But I was more talking specifically about individuals can say, you pay me $25,000 a year. I'm just throwing that number out there. I don't have a status card. I'm not tax exempt now. Like you're trading in that status card. And I had heard that that's something that perhaps conservatives would be hoping to advance.
I'm not familiar with that particular proposal, but
unsurprising, he's not familiar with a lot of proposals.
What about, and this speaks to we just had headlines yesterday about the graves, more graves potentially. These would be across the former residential school sites in Canada. We know this. This was laid out in the 2015 TRC Commission. This is going to be a years-long process of First Nations people, communities looking for these graves. Is that something, I know this government has said we support it, whatever it is, we fund it. Is that the tack that you would take as well?
No.
We would fully fund
all
the
wouldn't.
inquiries into the human remains at the or near the sites of residential schools.
And my last question, I guess, would be for you. Winnipeg, looking at Manitoba for the next election. You think you guys are going to regain a big stronghold on this area?
Look, people are suffering in Winnipeg under Justin Trudeau. The young people can't afford homes. Single moms are putting water in their milk because they can't afford groceries for their kids.
No, it's literally because of Heather Stephenson. That's why. As well as the dog shit mayor that's running Winnipeg.
We have homelessness and drug overdoses, and violent crime is up 32% under Justin Trudeau's policies.
Not true.
People want a change in Winnipeg that will give them back control of their paycheck through lower taxes and less inflation. that will put violent, repeat, habitual offenders behind bars while respecting law-abiding hunters and anglers. And
Like, these are non-issues. Like, what he's bringing up is not an issue. Like, it's just not flat out not happening. Right? Like, every single fucking conservative does this, and I fucking hate it.
that's the change that I'm going to bring. I'm going to give Winnipeggers control of their own lives, their paychecks, and their futures. And that's why I believe I will win in Winnipeg and across Manitoba.
Except the fact that you're drastically unpopular across the country, including in Winnipeg, so you're not going to win there.
I know I said that was my last question, but I have one more because you brought up crime, and that's a very good one, especially here in Winnipeg. What is the solution to rising crime? I mean, we've got drug problems, we've got mental health that's not good.
Invest into programs like Clean Needles. Invest into programs and healthcare to help with mental health, and completely get rid of all of poverty. That's how you solve that problem, because poverty and crime are inherently interlinked. If you solve poverty, you're going to solve a vast majority of crime. Being
addressed, I know you had mentioned, the BC model didn't appeal to you as much as the Alberta model.
Yeah.
Is there a Manitoba model, or is there a one-size-fits-all?
Well,
no.
Recovery and treatment for a drug-free life. That's the future. Right now, people can't get recovery. There aren't beds available. And while Justin Trudeau wastes billions of dollars buying back hunting rifles and taking away the hunting rights of First Nations people, supposedly he thinks this is going to help fight crime. I put those resources into reinforcing our borders against drugs and gun smugglers, and on recovery and treatment for drug addicts. We know it's possible. I met a lady just in Tim's just yesterday, a waitress who had been a nurse, got addicted to opioids because, of course, the lying dirtbag pharmaceutical companies told her that it was safe. She got addicted, she lost her kids, but guess what? She got into a recovery program and she turned her life around. And now she's working, she has an income,
I wonder
she's
how,
a responsible member.
If this is allegedly true, I wonder how much this costed her.
Of our community. It proves that no matter how far lost people feel like they are, there is hope to turn it around. We need to get them the recovery and treatment to make that possible.
You'd give the provinces that money for that, increased healthcare spending? Would you do it with no strings like they're asking? Because then they could use it for exactly these types of programs.
They won't, though.
I'll
they
have
won't.
A very clear recovery and treatment proposal coming, and it will get results. We're not just going to throw money around. I want beds, I want counselors, detox, medication that will help with withdrawal and overdoses. They're all going to be part of my plan. And we will rescue the lives of our friends, our neighbors, our brothers and sisters who have fallen victim to this horrific addiction crisis. We will get them back, we will save their lives, and we'll put them back in control of their lives.
Like, the thing is, the opioid epidemic, he's not even wrong about, right? The main issue is that, he's not gonna do any of this if he ever gets elected. It's just all smoke and mirrors.
Okay. Well, we thank you for taking the time to sit down with us today.
Thank you.
It's been a pleasure. Covered lots of ground there.
Yes, great.
So yeah, Poilievre vows a different approach to reconciliation. Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre said his government would fully fund all the inquiries into graves at former residential school sites shortly after speaking to a Winnipeg-based group that has come under fire for comments on residential schools and discrimination. Poilievre spoke at a Frontier Center for Public Policy luncheon in Winnipeg on Friday. This will be last Friday. The Winnipeg-based think tank ran radio ads in 2018 that said it was a myth that residential schools robbed Indigenous children of their childhood, which is completely fucking psychotic. Last summer, the center posted a commentary on its website that said stories about murdered and secretly buried residential school children are highly suspicious, if not false, completely false, which is psychotic. We know for a fact that residential schools have had a history of doing this. Like, it's completely disgusting that they're saying this, first of all. As someone who is Métis myself, this upsets me that they're saying this. Last month, the center posted an article that said anti-white male policies represent the only systemic discrimination there is, which is bullshit. There's a lot more systemic discrimination problems within Canada itself, and it's not anti-white male. Like, sorry, the anti-white Protestant Christian males are fine. Like, no, it's idiotic. Poilievre defended his decision to speak at the luncheon. We speak with groups all the time with which we disagree, Poilievre said in an interview with the Canadian press following his speech. When asked about his thoughts on reconciliation in an interview with Global News, Poilievre said he would take a different approach to the efforts if elected, and vowed his government would fully fund all the inquiries into human remains at the or near the sites of residential schools, which is a lie. He's not going to do any of that. Like, Harper said the exact same shit, and none of it really happened. Like, you know, when like Harper like apologized for but not really for residential schools. Like, it was so fucking disgusting. He said he would work to bring clean drinking water to every reserve and every community by making some of the payments to contractors tasked with setting up water systems on First Nation contingents on those clean water systems, continue to work for years to come. Our First Nation people deserve clean drinking water, he said. Poilievre also promised to revisit Canada's Indian Act, which he called a disaster, which I agree with this. It was a complete fucking disaster. People, the Indigenous people were essentially forced to sign something that they could not understand, because it was written in a different language, so that's cool. It's a racist colonial hangover that it gives all the control to self-serving and incompetent politicians, including himself, bureaucrats and lobbyists in Ottawa, and takes away the control from the First Nations themselves, he said. Yeah, the funny thing is that you fall under this, my guy. Like, you're honestly more incompetent than fucking Justin Trudeau. Like, literally every single fucking thing that you say is quite literally the exact same shit, like, almost, and then, like, just slogans. Like, just inflation. Okay, what the fuck are you gonna do about that? What material conditions are you going to change in order for that? Like, come on, bro. I want to make it easier for First Nations that want to opt out of the Indian Act to do so that they can control their own money and their land and their resources and their own decisions. Poilievre took heat on social media on Friday for his decision to speak at the FCPP meeting, which, yeah, he should have gotten heat for that. Federal Liberal Cabinet Minister Dan Vandel, who represents the Winnipeg riding of St. Boniface, St. Vital, accused Poilievre of promoting ideas and organizations that do not represent Winnipeg or Manitoba. Bonnedel is right here. They do not represent us at all. It's just silly. Mark Miller, the federal minister of Crown Indigenous Relations, also criticized the Conservative leader. In 2008, Mr. Poilievre rightfully apologized for saying that residential school survivors, many of whom were very advanced, who were of very advanced age should learn the value of hard work. Today's stunt put into question that apology. Read a post on Miller's Twitter account. Yeah, I completely agree with Miller on this. Like, sorry, that's just the truth. It 100% put a question on that apology. And like, if he actually meant it, I don't think he did, to be perfectly honest. Poilievre said his feelings are clear. I obviously support reconciliation, and I believe that residential schools are an ugly and horrific blight on our history of a country. Poilievre also fired back at his opponents, saying the Liberal NDP politicians in the past have spoken to the Frontier Centre. I mean, it's not surprising in the slightest if that is the case. But, generally think tanks tend to be more right-wing and tend to be more conservative, so I have my doubts. His staff provided examples, including the former Federal Finance Minister Paul Martin giving an interview to the Centre 21 years ago, and former Governor General and Manitoba NDP Minister Ed Sheeran speaking at the Centre luncheon in 2013, 29 years after he last held public office. I mean, that doesn't really matter because, like, he's not in a position of power. Like, if he was in a position of power, that would be a little bit different. Poilievre also compared the situation to the federal NDP leader, Jagmeet Singh, supports for Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's minority government after Trudeau admitted to having used blackface and brownface in costumes during his younger days. I mean, they're just reusing the same old fucking criticisms time and time again. Yeah, sure, it was fucking terrible that Justin Trudeau did that. Okay. Yeah, no duh. But, like, when that's, like, the only thing that fucking conservatives have talked about for, like, the past, like, 5 years, it just gets, like, annoying. Like, yeah, we know that he did that. Like, come on, bro. Criticize them for something else. Like, Jesus Christ. Like, in comparative, like, Justin Trudeau has only had, like, what, 7, he's only had 7 like incidences that or controversies, I should say, compared to Stephen Harper's like 72, I believe. Like, conservative leaders have a lot more controversies than liberals, generally speaking. Which is kind of funny. Officials at the Frontier Centre did not immediately return requests for comment. Poilievre's speech was part of a day-long visit to Manitoba's capital, where a by-election is soon expected to fall in Winnipeg's South Centre seat, held by Liberal Member of Parliament Jim Carr, who died in December. Yeah, that's right. We talked about Jim Carr a little bit when he had passed. The seat has a long Liberal tradition, although the Conservatives won it for a term in 2011. I honestly think the Liberals are going to win again, to be perfectly honest. Poilievre said he will be campaigning in the riding and express optimism. I think people in Manitoba have suffered enough under Trudeau. They want change. I mean, the main thing is that no, they've suffered underneath the fucking conservative premiership, because like the conservative premiers have just given up on like even pretending to care about like their provinces, and it's fucking idiotic. The premier is silent. Like Heather Stephenson is silent after Tory MLAs attended Poilievre's speech, which is unsurprising. Manitoba Premier Heather Stephenson is refusing to address why members of her Progressive Conservative caucus attended an event organized by a group that has been called out for minimizing the impact of racism in residential schools. Stephenson, who has said Indigenous reconciliation is top priority for her government since becoming Premier more than a year ago, skirted around the question about Tory MLAs attending the Frontier Centre for Public Policy event on January 13th, featuring federal conservative leader Pierre Poilievre. An email from Heather from Stephenson's press secretary focused instead on Poilievre being in Winnipeg. The premier did not have any plans to meet with him, but their schedules did not. Did have plans to meet with him, but their schedules did not work out. Yeah. Okay. A member of Parliament PC caucus members attended the gathering at the downtown RBC Convention Center, including Justice Minister Kevin Gertson, Health Minister Audrey Gordon, Sport, Culture, and Heritage Minister Andrew Smith, and MLAs James Tamisa Radson, Obi Khan Fort White, and Kevin Kelvin, Parkfield Park. A PC caucus spokesperson said that the party wasn't keeping track of who attended their federal center. Attended the Frontier Center public policy event, and it wasn't a big deal. I mean, you should be keeping track of that, and yeah, that is actually a big deal. Just as the Manitoba NDP and Manitoba Liberals would would attend events featuring the federal Liberals in their respective parties, some PC caucus members attended an event featuring the Conservative Party of Canada leader. The spokesperson said in a prepared statement. Any ticket purchased by a PC caucus member were paid for personally. Kelvin, elected last month in a by-election, explained in an email why he attended Poilievre's speech. In my experience, the best leaders are the best listeners. He's not. And I went to listen on my own dime. I wanted to listen to Mr. Poilievre's thoughts on the improving healthcare across the nation, his stance on violent crime and affordability for Manitobans and Canadians, Kelvin wrote on Monday. Last summer, the Winnipeg-based Frontier Centre posted a commentary on its website that said stories about murder and secretly buried children at residential schools are highly suspicious, if not completely false. Last month, the center posted an article that said anti-white male policies represented the only ongoing systemic discrimination, which we know is not true. Attending such an event as a high-stakes election shows a lack of judgment by Brandon University political science professor Kelly Sunders. Which, yeah, they're right. They're almost 30 points behind the NDP, Sunders said, referring to the PC's Winnipeg polling results in a December Probe Research Inc. survey. To not think about the optics of every single thing that they're doing from now until the election time, specifically around public events such as this with Flashpoint organizations like the Frontier Center, is shocking to me. On Monday, Frontier Center spokesperson David Lease said the organization wants to see crime investigations when human remains are located at former residential school sites and have a respectful dialogue about reconciliation, then accused the media of misrepresenting the center and threatened legal action before hanging up the phone on the Free Press. unsurprising. The center was published. The center has published reports calling for the abolition of the Indian Act, which I don't disagree with. Something Poilievre has also publicly endorsed. On January 13th, the conservative leader who said he suspects or supports reconciliation and called to residential schools and called an ugly and horrific blight on our country's on our history. He told the Canadian press, "We speak with groups all the time which we disagree with." Yeah, Speak with some fucking anarchists then. I'd love to see that. Taking part in an event associated with the Frontier Center is a price the PCs can ill afford to pay when they're tanking in the polls, especially in Winnipeg's urban commissaries that are considered more progressive, Sunder said. Which, yeah, people like to think that, you know, Winnipeg is like very fucking terrible and like literally everything, but like, no, Winnipeg, especially in like some more urban environments, are very progressive, especially the ones that are more diverse. It also undermines the Premier's messaging. Indigenous reconciliation is a priority, she added. Indigenous reconciliation critic for the NDP, Ian Bushy, said the Premier must explain how she can say reconciliation is a priority but not call out the Frontier Center or her caucus members for participating in one of its events. It's just kind of, here's talking points for the public, but at the same time, we're gonna go and do this kind of thing. We're gonna support these kinds of organizations, said the Kiwatanuk MLA and former chief of Hollowwater First Nation. The PC MLAs in attendance made a conscious decision to hear Poilievre speak at the Frontier Center's event, rather than choosing another time to see the federal conservative leader in Winnipeg, said Bushy. We choose to do it. We choose to do this, but honestly, we have to reflect their values as well. Did we? I think this is just more of the same thing, right? Yeah, it is. Okay, let's move on. So there's new guidelines or new suggestions for alcohol consumption. So let's watch.
How much alcohol we can safely consume is being drastically rethought. New recommended guidelines for Canadians advise even moderate drinking. Anything more than 2 drinks a week puts your health at risk. The update is from the Canadian Centre on Substance Use and Addiction, which reviewed 6,000 studies on alcohol use. It defines a standard drink as 12 ounces of beer, 5 ounces of wine, or 1.5 ounces of spirits. According to the report, consuming no alcohol has significant benefits to health and sleep. 3 to 6 drinks per week puts you at moderate risk of developing 7 types of cancer, including colon and breast cancer. And more than 7 alcoholic drinks a week puts you at increasingly high risk of heart disease and stroke. Mike Drolet on the new thinking about the risks of drinking.
Whether it's at a bar, a sporting event, or party, alcohol isn't merely prevalent. It's celebrated in society today. A decade ago, the medical community put a number on what moderation looks like. No more than 15 drinks per week for men, 10 for women. But now, after a review of 6,000 medical studies, the new recommended guideline is no more than 2 drinks.
We were also very shocked about how much different and how far we've come in the science since 2011. And frankly, we're like, wow, like how are we going to get people to drink 2 drinks a week?
How indeed? The Canadian Centre on Substance Use and Addiction wants warning labels placed on bottles, informing consumers of the increased risks for cancer, heart disease, and stroke.
So after 7 drinks, the risk is exponential. So it increases at a much faster rate than it does at the moderate level.
France has had labels on its bottles since 1991, yet a recent study found that they were too small and lacked information. In short, they were ineffective. Canada's wine industry has another idea, labels, but with more focus on information than warnings.
A 12 or 10% alcohol bottle of wine is going to have obviously a lesser amount of alcohol than a 15% alcohol. So putting that on the label and understanding what a standard drink is makes total sense to us.
Now, the recommendations are just that, recommendations, which Health Canada is in the process of reviewing. In the meantime, from a long-term medical point of view, the news isn't all grim.
I mean, like, the only people that this is gonna hurt is, like, white urban moms who drink a lot, like a fuck ton of wine and, like, fuck the pool boy. That's realistically who it's only gonna affect. As well as, like, major, like, alcoholics.
If you've been drinking really heavily for the last decade and we're very unaware of these risks, there is the potential, the damage isn't necessarily done.
It's a dramatic shift from previous reports. Will Canadians listen? Mike Drolet, Global
Probably
News
not.
Toronto.
Probably not, honestly.
A new report out today may have more Canadians seriously thinking about their alcohol consumption. The Canadian Centre for Substance Abuse and Addiction has released its first drinking guidelines in 12 years, and the changes are drastic. In 2011, the recommendation for women was no more than 10 drinks per week. The recommendation for men, no more than 15. Here are the figures. The report classifies low risk for men and women as 2 drinks per week. 2. Moderate risk is 3 to 6, and high risk is 7 or more. A single serving amounts to 1 12-ounce glass of 5%.
I mean, this isn't really gonna
or a 5-ounce glass
affect me too much because I don't drink. I mostly just consume cannabis.
Also lays out the
It's way better.
health risks. Most notably, it says 3 to 6 drinks per week puts an individual at an increased risk of developing cancer. 7 or more increases the risk of heart disease and stroke. The report's authors also note that with every drink in excess of 7, the risk goes up radically. Was Dr. Marla Shapiro, CTV's medical contributor. Good morning to you, Dr. Marla. So let's start by discussing what is a standard drink.
So, you know, when you go to a restaurant and they offer you a glass of wine, they'll say 6 or 9 ounces, and that's well above, because a standard drink, if you're looking at wine, is about 5 ounces. If you're looking at beer, it's about 12 ounces, or a bottle of beer. And if you're looking at hard liquor, it's about 1.5 ounces. So that's the first thing, that most of us can't count how much we're having because we don't really know what a standard drink is.
This is inherently a good thing,
don't know
right?
How many drinks are in a standard bottle of
like,
wine, for example, if you're drinking at home?
You know, people do die of alcohol poisoning still.
Of wine. So clearly that might be
And like, I love the fact that, you know, people say, oh, well, if I just drink like 1 glass of wine a day, it's good for my body. No, it's really not.
Based on what we've heard from the World Health Organization, the only zero risk is 0 drinks.
At that point, like, you're just trying to defend your alcoholic tendencies, pretty much. Like, that's really the only thing that you're doing.
A week, you're looking at low risk. 3 to 6 drinks a week is moderate. A daily drink, you're looking at high risk. And when you start getting to those moderate risks, you're beginning to recognize the fact that alcohol is a carcinogen. It can cause cancer, cancer of the throat, the pharynx, the larynx, the esophagus, breast in women, colorectal. So often people aren't aware that this actually is equivalent to, for example, smoking. Do you talk about safe levels? When am I going to increase my risk of lung cancer? You need to understand the relationship between alcohol intake and the outcomes. And then when you look at a daily drink a day during a week, 7 drinks, you're looking at an increase in heart disease and stroke.
I just want to reemphasize for everybody, we're talking 2 drinks a week?
That's right, and we're talking about, for example, if it's a glass of wine, 5 ounces. So it really is highlighting that the quantity of what we drink we're often unaware of because we don't really understand what a standard drink is, and we don't understand the relationship.
I love the fact that, you know, she was like, oh, just 2 drinks a week? I'm like, yeah. I think this is going to affect the reporter a lot more.
Between intake and risk, heart disease, cancer, stroke, and so on, in women getting
Higher than
pregnant,
men?
higher than men. We're looking at, for example, difficulty getting pregnant, maintaining pregnancy. Most women are aware of the fact that you can't drink during pregnancy because of something called fetal alcohol syndrome. But you know, those guidelines that used to look at 10 drinks a week for women, 15 drinks for men, those are quite outdated. And this is looking at all the new data that we have, really highlighting, understanding the dose relationship in terms of outcome and risk.
So what do you think in terms of public service announcements, the federal government putting messages out there about the risk? What should be done? I know people want to see it on bottles.
Yeah, and we do
bottles.
have a study from 2017 that showed that when the cancer risk was put in the bottle, it decreased drinking by about 7% in that one particular store that had the labeling. So it's like any other known carcinogen and exposure. I think we need to have a lot of education on what a standard drink is, what the relationship is between intake and outcome, potential in terms of health, having labeling on bottles, and also understanding on a bottle how many serving sizes are in this bottle, which most people don't understand.
Fascinating stuff. Real talker today.
Absolutely.
Dr. Marla, thank you so much.
Let me ask you, first of all, about being involved in this process. What struck you as you were reviewing this mountain of research and coming up with the guidelines we have today?
I think, you know, the volume of research that's come out about alcohol-related risks in the last decade has been phenomenal. And so it was a lot of work on behalf of the panel and those working on this project to navigate that literature and really come up with the most evidence-based, up-to-date, accurate findings to inform people living in Canada about alcohol-related harms.
At the end of that process, we have these guidelines.
I have a feeling that the alcohol industry is not going to really like that at all because, you know, they're making relatively decent money on that.
And as I was mentioning, no amount of alcohol is safe, is what you found. 2 drinks a week, low risk. And that's a big change because before it was different for men and women. Men, 15 drinks a week. Women, 10 drinks a week was considered okay. Now they're the same, just 2, low risk. Why a departure from the sex-specific limits?
Yeah, it's a great question. And based on the most up-to-date evidence, we found at low levels of consumption that there wasn't any difference in risk based on the physiological differences between males and females. But that said, the nuances of that, and you can see that in the report, is that once we exceed the high level of the moderate range, so 6 or more drinks a week, females' risk actually exponentially increases relative to males. And so there are differences in risk, but those differences don't show themselves at low levels. And I think it's really important to remember, though, that even though women's risk increases exponentially, men by far are still drinking more.
I mean, it's because they gotta crack open a good beer when you get home from a hot day's work. That's the only way, brother.
And are
only way I can relax.
Harms than women as a whole.
The only way I can relax is getting drunk and beating my wife and kids.
Okay, that is a big part of it, and thank you for that differentiation. You know, we were looking at the screen and the guidelines 2+ and then 6+, and more than that, anything beyond 6. We had a question from a viewer, and he was wondering whether there are certain types of alcohol that are worse than others, as you found in your research. Wine versus beer, red wine versus white, are they all considered standard drinks for the purposes of these guidelines?
Yes, they are. I know this has been something that's been around a long time about red wine being good for the heart, but the literature has come a long way, and there's really no...
Yeah, and like people who just like want to defend like their alcoholic tendencies are like, yeah, no, they point to like that one study and like completely disregard like any other research that has been done within like the last couple of years.
No evidence that alcohol is good for us in any capacity, and that it doesn't matter what
People
type of
are not
alcohol
happy
is,
about it.
that, less is better.
Okay, Raj, thank you for the question. And Professor, thank you for the answer. One of the things that's come out in this evolving body of literature is the link between alcohol and cancer. And that is very clear that it may be surprising to Canadians, the links to some 7 different forms of cancer. We got an email, Professor, from Brian, who said his father drinks a beer every day. He's 86 with no health issues, so he will not be changing his drinking habits, he wrote. He's more concerned about breathing in secondhand smoke from smokers in public. So, raising smoking, there was that direct link. Smoking causes cancer. There's no easy causal link with alcohol and cancer. It was clear age, lifestyle, genetic history all may factor in. So, how do you get people to take that connection seriously?
Yeah, there's very low awareness, I think, of the link between alcohol and cancer, but it's very clear that alcohol is a carcinogen, that it is directly linked to cancer, and 7 different types of cancer. Every year, over 7,000 Canadians die from cancer that was alcohol related, particularly breast and colon cancer. And I think the challenge with the example you gave is this understanding of risk. Not everyone who consumes alcohol is going to get cancer, but the risk for more you drink, the greater that risk is. And so it's really about individuals just being informed that that is a risk that comes with consuming alcohol, and that they have to make decisions that are right for them in terms of how much risk they're willing to accept.
And yet there is that hardline statement of no amount of alcohol is safe. And we know how normalized it is in our popular culture. And again, another viewer, Kevin, writing, it's one of the few pleasures I have left in this life. That's what he told us just this morning. So how to change behaviors when it is such a part of culture and when people do enjoy it so much?
Absolutely. And I think what I want to make really clear is that by no means are we trying to tell people not to drink or to how to drink. Our goal of these guidelines is to inform people of how, of the risks associated with alcohol, and ultimately let them decide what is best and what works for them. For a lot of people, 2 drinks per week is going to feel like a limit that they're not able to achieve on a regular basis. But our goal would be to have people just reassess and evaluate their alcohol use and try to reduce it by any amount. Any amount that they reduce will reduce their risk of harm.
I thought that was interesting in the study. The benefits are clear of some reduction. Many of the health effects, negative health effects, are reversible even by any degree of alcohol consumption reduction. In terms of making people aware of all of this, Joanne wrote to us that the warnings that are on cigarettes, why are they not on alcohol bottles along with the pictures? This would probably scare more people. Thank you, Joanne, for that. That's a big part of your report. It makes a big push for labeling on alcohol containers, Professor.
Yes, we are fully in support of alcohol warning labels, and they're likely not to look the same as cancer on cigarette packages, those types of labels. But what we are asking is that the government really think about adding labels to alcohol containers that tell individual consumers how many drinks are in their beverage containers so that they can make more informed decisions about how many drinks they want to have, and that they are informed of these guidelines and know where to access more information, and that they are also warned of these very important health risks that are associated with alcohol.
Health Canada has told CBC News it's going to examine the guidelines, so we will await any action on the agency's part. I'm wondering overall, at the end of this, I dare say it's going to cause some real reverberations today now that the guidelines are finally out. What impact, what effect do you hope this has in Canada, this new report and these new guidelines, Professor?
Probably less consumption in alcoholic beverages, right? And, you know, a decrease in, say, drunk driving accidents, right? That's what I imagine. as well as less alcohol poisoning too.
Faster.
I hope that they bring greater awareness and to alcohol consumption and the risks that it poses for us as a population. There are people in Canada, across Canada, experiencing harms from alcohol every day, and they have the right to know about this information so that they can make more informed decisions and reduce their risk of harms. And so the takeaway is to really increase Canadians' awareness and all people living in everywhere of Canada of the harms associated with alcohol.
Okay. I don't know. There will be something that I will be covering a little bit later this weekend, provided I'm not streaming Fire Emblem Engage, which will be like the World Economic Forum. Because that happened and I completely forgot about it, so we'll be covering that later, hopefully.
Most Canadians don't know that alcohol causes cancer. It's a carcinogen up there with tobacco and asbestos. There are thousands of studies that point to the cancer risk. And yet, there are no warning labels like the ones you see on cigarettes.
I mean, there's also like no warning labels on like, say, cannabis. Like the most that we have for like cannabis products is like the THC logo, right? Honestly, I'm kind of surprised that like the like alcohol is getting the same treatment now, because like generally speaking, alcohol tends to be widely accepted within like our society as like a passable drug. But like then again, like so is caffeine as well. So
At least not yet. But the pressure is building to make cancer warning labels on alcohol mandatory, because you have a right to know. There's a lot to unpack, so let's start with the latest catalyst to this, Canada's new expected drinking guidance. The old guidance suggested no more than 15 drinks a week for men and 10 for women. The new advice?
Like
any more than 2 drinks.
Like the thing is like honestly like 15 and 10 on like seemed way too high to me anyways, right?
Drinks a week is risky. 3 to 6 drinks a week increases the risk of developing certain cancers. More than 7 drinks a week also increases your risk of heart disease and stroke. The danger goes up with every additional drink. Why the drastic change in guidance?
Well, it changed because we have better evidence. So last time we did the guidelines, it was in 2011. In 10 years, there's definitely been significant improvements in our understanding of mortality and morbidity associated with alcohol use. We have much better understanding of the link between alcohol and cancer. We are recommending for people to become aware of those facts.
Catherine Paradis is with the Canadian Centre on Substance Use and Addiction. She says the evidence is clear, and it's why health warning labels are necessary to help inform Canadians.
People should assess their personal risk.
Paradis co-chaired the scientific panel behind the new advice. These experts reviewed nearly 6,000 studies that link alcohol with cancer. But Paradis says most Canadians aren't aware of the danger.
They don't know about certain risks. For example, the alcohol and cancer, they don't know. Then there are some facts that they think they know, but it's just plain wrong. For example, that alcohol would protect you from certain heart disease. That is no longer accurate. You know, the most recent studies show that's not true.
That's where labels come in. Ones that tell you how many drinks are in a container so you can keep track of how much you're drinking. And labels with health risks like cancer so you know why drinking less is better. And experts want all that information right where you can see it.
Standard drink labeling are necessary because people need to be able to count their drink. They need consistent, easy to use information at the point of pour. Labels about health risk, warning labels, will allow to provide people with that rationale as to why they should follow the guidance. If labeling appears on containers, that will really support people making those decisions a little bit easier.
Because most people have no idea.
Most people have no idea. No.
That does kind of tie into.
I mean, to be fair though, like not too many people actually keep up with like any form of studies unless you're like a brain broken idiot like myself. Because, like, for the most part, people generally tend to go with, like, the recommendations and everything from, like, experts. Unless it was, like, during fucking COVID. Oh my god. That was fucking terrible.
For labels is based on research led by Canada. Erin Hoban is a senior scientist with Poilievre, Ontario. She ran one of the only real-world experiments of alcohol warning labels in Yukon in 2017. These labels were used in 2 government-owned liquor stores for a month.
So what we learned from that study was that the cancer warning grabbed consumer attention. They read the cancer warning very closely. They thought about that message. They talked to their neighbors and their friends about that message.
People not only talked about the warnings, Hoban says, they drank less too.
Exposing people to cancer warnings on alcohol containers actually is associated with a 7% reduction in per capita alcohol use compared to sites that were not exposed to the alcohol warning labels.
The Yukon Cancer Label study was cut short because the alcohol industry intervened and the Yukon government couldn't afford a potential legal battle. We asked the industry where they stand on cancer warning labels now. Wine Growers Canada, Beer Canada, and Spirits Canada replied with statements focusing on drinking responsibly and in moderation. Wine Growers Canada added it doesn't believe health warning labels are the best way to educate consumers.
I mean, but like, it does help educate consumers though. Like, look at the smoking labels, for example. Like, as well as, like, you know, there are other places that do labeling as well for certain things. I believe it's Brazil that does labeling for like certain sugar contents or something like that. I don't exactly remember. All I remember is it's some Latin American country that does labeling for sugars. Oh no, it was for pricing. I think it was. That's right. Because like we watched the marketplace on it.
Beer Canada says it remains open to labeling suggestions.
And like the only reason why these companies are saying this stuff is because they know that they're going to be losing sales. And it's going to affect their bottom line. That's the only reason why they're saying this.
That prove helpful in reducing harmful drinking. But experts say the industry actually has a legal duty to clearly inform you of any risks, especially when those risks are not well known.
So how critical are warning labels on alcohol containers to inform consumers?
They are not just critical, they are required under the law currently. I think that there is no excuse that they're not there. If we're going to enjoy this, then we ought to be aware of the risk.
And I love going for beer. This is not saying don't.
And like the thing is that like they do the exact same thing for cannabis, like as what they do for tobacco. It's just weird to me that they, you know, do it for tobacco and cannabis, but not alcohol. Like, I think it's time that the alcoholic industry or the alcohol industry catches up with tobacco and cannabis. Because, like, if we're gonna have like warning labels on, say, like the bag of pot or like the pack of smokes, like we should be doing that for like the bottle of wine too.
Don't drink beer.
Jacob Shelley is a law professor at Western University in London, Ontario, who has worked on alcohol policy.
This is not about prohibition. This is about being aware of the risks and making informed decisions.
He often talks to his students about the harmful effects of alcohol and says the obligation to inform is higher when a product is ingested.
I'm not surprised that the alcohol industry has opposed that kind of warning because there's money to be made by increasing consumption. And so the more consumers actually purchase, the more money they make. So there's a conflict on their part to provide that information, but legally they're required.
If the industry is not compelled to do it and it's not in their interest to do it, who is responsible for getting them on the containers?
At a minimum, we should expect governments to be doing this, right?
True.
We have governments regulating all sorts of products to ensure they're safe, from baby cribs to cars, right? And so the government really ought to be more involved in requiring these types of labels and can justify that requirement by saying that this is an obligation that manufacturers already have.
We reached out to Health Canada. The agency responded with a statement. Health Canada says it recognizes alcohol use presents a significant public health and safety issue, adding it will review the new guidance and any recommendations. But the political pressure is heating up because once again, it comes back to you having the right to know.
Somebody said to me just this morning, I did not know that alcohol was a Class 1 carcinogen. And you know what? I think I'm going to second guess that second drink next time around as a result. So
Lisa Marie Barron is a New Democrat MP.
I mean, a lot of it also does come down to self-control, right? Like for me, I'll use myself as an example. For me, I don't drink alcohol. I don't smoke. I only do or only consume cannabis. I don't smoke cannabis though. And like the thing is like I cap myself off at like say 1 drink of a cannabis drink or like 2-3 gummies, right? So it's you know, it definitely does help with some form of self-control. I understand that some people don't necessarily have as great as self-control as myself. But you know, that does play a factor into it, as well as like the norm has been 10-15 drinks, right? So it's going to be hard for people to go down to 2.
We caught up with her last fall in Nanaimo, British Columbia.
I just want people to have the information so that they're not going, I didn't have that information, that I should have had access.
She met with her constituents to discuss a motion she put forward in the House of Commons last summer, calling for a national warning label strategy.
So this is not about placing judgment on alcohol consumption.
Barron used to work in addictions and has seen how harmful the effects can be.
In your perspective, how critical is it that Canadians understand the risks involved with drinking?
I mean, it's life-saving information for people to be able to have.
She wants Ottawa, not the industry, to dictate what Canadians know.
Right now, it's left with industry to decide what Canadians should or shouldn't know on the bottles. And so I'm trying to turn that around and say it's federal responsibility to ensure that Canadians have this information. And here's one tool for us to be able to get that moving forward.
And the pressure is heating up on another political front too. Senator Patrick Brazeau is pushing for labels as well, this time in the
Let's go, Patrick.
So I rise today to propose a modest but essential amendment to the Food and Drugs Act to require honest labeling, a cancer warning on alcohol products.
He's also urging the government to act on cancer warning labels, and it's deeply personal.
I know what it is when people hurt, and I know that alcohol causes a lot of hurt, and this is just my way of trying to give back, and that's all it is.
Brazeau says his own experience with addiction was devastating. He and his team say Canadians have a right to know that drinking can be dangerous to your health.
Why do you think it's so important that the federal government take the lead on this?
Well, obviously, you know, it's a health issue that affects all Canadians.
Definitely.
And now it's up to the federal government to be bold, to take a strong stance, and to have moral courage, and to say exactly that alcohol causes cancer to all Canadians, so they can make better informed decisions for themselves.
Okay, so this was the industry resistance.
Okay, there it is.
Brazeau knows what he's up against and says no matter how big the opposition, he's not backing down.
I know that this is going to be a tough fight. It may take months and may take even years, and it may take different prime ministers. I don't know, but we need to start having that debate. And I know that the industry is very powerful, but you know, this is not a fight.
Yeah, but the government's even more powerful.
Cancer, and this is a fight that I'm willing to take on.
So that word, cancer, it's terrifying, and I'm wondering how likely is it that someone who drinks will then get cancer?
I'm having people all over the place messaging me right now and trying to get back to things to figure some stuff out right now.
It's a good question, and we asked all the experts, and there's no easy answer because there are a lot of factors that come into play with cancer, hereditary factors, lifestyle, age. Alcohol is a risk factor that you can control, though, and that's the message that experts want to put out, that there is no safe amount, and it really just comes down to an individual's tolerance for risk. The labels come in to inform Canadians about those risks so that they can make informed decisions about their health.
If the science is so clear, though, why the lag?
Big part of it is that alcohol is so normalized in our culture. 80%
True.
of Canadians drink, and many might still believe
True.
there are health benefits to drinking.
True.
That's been debunked. Politically, too, it might feel like an unpopular choice, but
She was right about literally all of that. Some people are gonna think that there's still health benefits to it. Pretty much a vast majority of Canadians drink alcohol, as well as it's normalized within society, right?
survey from the Canadian Cancer Society done recently found 8 out of 10 Canadians would actually support warning labels on alcohol.
All right, Joanna, thank you.
Well, yeah, anything to protect themselves is people are inherently self-motivated, so any form to protect themselves would be great. Wait, was this just uploaded? Oh, bro, that's awesome. Okay, Canadians should consider limiting their alcohol consumption to 2 drinks per week or less, according to a new national guidance. The recommendation released on Tuesday by the Canadian Centre on Substance Use and Addiction said that drinking more than 2 standard drinks is an equivalent of 13.45 grams of pure alcohol at a time is associated with increased risks. The CCSA report is an update to Canada's low-risk alcohol drinking guidelines that were published in 2011. The update comes after 2 years of research, a review of nearly 6,000 peer-reviewed studies, and about 1,000 surveyed submissions from the public. Part of the project was funded by Health Canada. The definition of a standard drink in Canada is equivalent to a bottle of beer, glass of wine, a shot glass of spirits, or a bottle of cider. The harm to yourself and others is moderate, meaning a 1 in 100 risk of premature death if you have 3 to 6 drinks weekly, CCSA said. As you increase your intake, the risks grow higher, more steeply for women than men, above when they go over 6 drinks per week. The principle that we want to land on is that people have the right to know less is better, and that there's harm reduction strategies that people can use to decrease the amount that they drink in order to improve their health and well-being, said Dr. Peter Butt, co-chair of the project to develop Canada's alcohol guidance. Previous Canadian guidelines, implemented in 2011, considered up to 2 drinks per a day, or 10 drinks a week for women, and 3 drinks per day, daily drinks, or 15 for men, was as low risk. The updated guidance aims to provide an evidence base for future alcohol policy and prevention resources, with a view to change Canada's drinking culture and curb the normalization of harmful use of alcohol in society, CCSA said in its report. Overwhelming evidence confirms that when it comes to drinking less alcohol, less consumption means less risk of harm from alcohol. It's the guidance stated. Pregnant people or those who are trying to get pregnant are advised to completely refrain from drinking alcohol, as can cause birth defects and could have long-term or lifelong impacts on the fetus. Meanwhile, if you are breastfeeding, drinking on occasion is acceptable, but no alcohol use is safest for the baby, as it takes about 2 hours for the alcohol to leave the body and the breast milk after consumption. Even though the female bodies are more susceptible to damage from alcohol, men drink more on average and are more likely than women to experience the cause of alcohol-related harms, according to research cited by the guidance. Canada, the legal drinking age is 19 and older, except for Quebec, Manitoba, and Alberta, where 18 is legally permitted to consume alcohol. Yeah, I'm so lucky I got to drink alcohol as soon as I turned 18, but I didn't really. CCSA says that the youth and young adults should delay alcohol use for as long as possible because the risk of adverse outcomes for them is greater compared to adults. Recent studies show alcohol consumption among Gen Z, those born in the late 1990s to early 2010s, is on the decline as people become more health conscious and shift to other substances, mostly like cannabis. The guidance also underlines certain circumstances when no alcohol use is safest, such as while driving, using machines and tools, taking medicine, or other drugs that interact with alcohol and dangerous physical activities. There is growing evidence about negative health impacts of alcohol for those who consume it and others around them. Alcohol can have can affect various organs, putting people into risk of carcinosis. What? Bro, I don't know these medical terms. Pancreatitis, gastrointestinal inflammation, heart disease, multiple cancers, as well as injury from falls, violence, and motor vehicle accidents, according to research compiled by the CCSA. It is also the leading preventable cause of death, disability, and social problems, CCSA stated. In 2020, alcohol use was linked to 70,000 new cancer cases in Canada, including 24% of breast cancer cases and 20% of colon cancer, 15% of rectal cancer, and 13% of oral and liver cancers, according to the global study published in the journal Lancet Oncology. The Canadian Cancer Society welcomed the new guidelines, saying drinking less alcohol lowers your risk of cancer. This guidance will help encourage people to rethink if they consume alcohol when they help them make informed decisions about that, said Elizabeth Holmes, senior manager of health policy at the CCS. To encourage Canadians to adhere to its updated guidance, CCSA said mandatory labeling of all alcoholic beverages with the number of standard drinks on a container, health warnings, and a newly released guidance would be effective. The CSA also said the guidance should be regularly reviewed as more evidence involves the consumption habits and consumption habits change. The COVID-19 pandemic has an impact on drinking habits in Canada, with stress, boredom, and loneliness contributing to an increased consumption for nearly a quarter of the population, according to a 2021 Statistics Canada survey. Meanwhile, around 1 in 5 Canadians also say they've been drinking less than they did pre-pandemic, and among those aged 15 to 29, 1/3 had decreased their consumption. To help Canadians cut down on their alcohol intake and slow down its absorption, but advised alternating a non-alcoholic beverage with an alcoholic beverage and making sure, you eat before you start drinking. I mean, that's just something you should do beforehand anyways. Other tips by CCSA include drinking slowly and staying hydrated with lots of water. People can socialize, people can enjoy the company of others without necessarily becoming intoxicated, because it's not just the cumulative effects, it's also an acute effect, said Butt. Oh yeah, that's right. So, Doug Ford, you know, like, despite everything, he's not taking the cries of Ontarians and pushing even further for privatization, including surgeries like knee and hip replacements, which we already talked about, as well as cataracts. So that's cool.
Ontario's premier says working with private clinics will
And like,
help.
here's the thing, like, private for-profit like healthcare, like we do have private healthcare within Canada, right? Our private healthcare is, you know, like, every single clinic you go to is like technically privately owned, but they're more or less like in it for patient care, not for profit. But the increase of for-profit clinics is like, has been a gigantic problem, right?
Help the public healthcare system.
To start, we're tackling the backlog of cataract surgeries.
And like, the funny thing is that, like, if you want like an example of how for-profit healthcare works within Canada, you need to look no further than just Saskatchewan. Saskatchewan has for-profit healthcare, and it leads to an even a higher increase in backlogs, as well as worse outcomes and increased waiting times. I believe in Saskatchewan, it's like a 28-week period to wait for that stuff, which unironically like made things worse for them, despite the fact that, you know, oh, we're gonna increase it's gonna decrease the wait times and blah blah blah, which isn't the case.
We have some of the longest waits.
MRI and CT scans, colonoscopies and endoscopies will also be added in the months to come, then knee and hip replacements. And Doug Ford insists that won't mean paying out of pocket.
All of these services,
despite the fact that, you know, the OHIP your OHIP card won't work at these places, so keep that in mind, Ontarians. You know, you'll have to pay with your credit card.
they'll be available using your OHIP card.
No, they won't.
Never your credit card.
He's wrong.
The goal,
He's lying.
To lower wait times, something school bus driver Dan Donaldson knows all about. He had to pay for speedy cataract surgery a few years ago to save his job.
The choice I had was to register with OHIP and hope that maybe you'd have the operation in 6 months, or go to a private clinic, which I did, and I had both my eyes fixed in 6 weeks.
Most experts agree something needs to be done to help the
You know what would actually help out with the backlog? Increasing pay for like nurses and other medical staff that are drastically important, increasing the number of hospitals built, giving financial incentive to those who go into the medical industry, whether it be, say, paying for their schooling or whatever. You know, there are a multitude of different ways to tackle this, but Doug Ford and the rest of these other conservative premiers do not give a shit. They only care about their wealthy benefactors and their wealthy friends that are going to be making ass loads of money off of this.
surgery backlog worsened by the pandemic. BC, Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Quebec have all, to varying degrees, considered or started offloading low-risk surgeries to private clinics, raising criticism about lack of oversight, especially in for-profit settings.
You can skimp.
Yeah, and then like also another thing to keep in mind is Galen Weston Jr., aka the CEO of Loblaws, is going to be making a fuck ton more money off of the privatization of or the the privatization for-profit model that a lot of these conservative premiers are pushing for. Despite the fact that, you know, he's already price gouging in Loblaws, so that's cool, right?
Particularly on staffing hours in order to generate more profit. And we also haven't heard a lot from governments as to how they're going to ensure that quality remains high in these facilities.
You just can't with for-profit.
That medical staff is
Because for-profit, like, they don't give a shit about patient care. Look at America. America has terrible patient care. That's what happens when you have a for-profit system. As well as, like, you know, I believe it's like 1 in 5 Americans' debt comes from medical, so that's cool.
especially nurses, might leave public hospitals in droves to work at private clinics with better pay and hours.
I mean, it's not just nurses, it's also, like, specialists, too. And, like, family medicine doctors.
How is this not going to impact our ability to provide care to the patients left behind in the public hospital? We'll be in the exact same spot, potentially, but this time, more acute, more difficult, more challenging surgeries, maybe the ones that are getting delayed.
So, Deanna, of the experts,
Like, if we actually followed the
Adrian, one solution
the guidelines that was set out by that one, or like those multiple like doctors within that we saw on Marketplace, like we would actually, you know, have a lot of this problem, a lot of these problems sorted out, right?
Build a kind of a no-frills operating room. Fewer surgical instruments, fewer staff needed, more surgeries can get done, but these are still not for profit, and the staffing and the booking still runs through the public healthcare model. They say this would not only be cheaper, but would be just as efficient, if not more efficient.
All right, Deanna Sumnak-John.
We begin with Ontario's response to the healthcare crisis. The province is expanding its use of private healthcare clinics to perform certain procedures, including cataract surgeries and CT scans, as well as knee and hip replacements. The goal is to reduce wait times.
But it will unironically increase wait times by using private for-profit clinics. Like Saskatchewan, again, Saskatchewan is the perfect example of that.
All I care about, all Minister Jones cares about, all our government cares about, is that you get the care you need quickly and safely.
Doug Ford
Wrong.
is misleading you when he says that funding surgeries in private for-profit clinics won't have an impact on Ontarians.
Sylvia Jones is Ontario's Minister of Health. She's in her riding of Dufferin-Caledon.
Uh-oh.
Minister Jones, thank you very much for speaking with us. I'd like to start by asking, can you explain how this new plan will not end up pulling staff out of already short-staffed hospitals?
Absolutely. So
it will.
A couple of things. First point, most importantly, is we have already seen a historic number of nurses being able to be licensed in the province of Ontario through the...
Like, you know what? Like, if we actually, like, you know, increase, like, the scope of, like, who's able to become a nurse, like, whether it be, like, international nurses or whatever, it's, you know, it would make things a lot easier to get, like, more nursing, right? As well as, like, you know, there being some sort of financial incentive to become a nurse and everything, right? And I find it really funny how, like, Doug Ford's government compared Canadian healthcare to like North Korean and the Cuban healthcare. Like, North Korea, no, I don't believe that. North Korea's healthcare system is shit. And, like, when it comes down to Cuba, I mean, like, Cuba has by far the best healthcare in the Western Hemisphere. Like, they, like, on average, we have, I believe it's like one doctor for, or like per capita, it's like one doctor per like 4 people or something, or whatever. No, it was, I think it was 4 per 1,000. Was it 1,000? I don't exactly remember the numbers, but like, all I know is like Cuba has 3 times as many doctors as we do per capita. So, you know, as well as, like, you know, they have a vaccine to, you know, help with, to help prevent, like, lung cancer and shit. Like, what the fuck have we done? Like, bro, we're getting fucking rolled by Cuba. Like, goddamn. As well as, like, you know, Cuba has also sent doctors to like Ontario, for example, like, you know, expecting nothing out of it. So there's that aspect of it as well.
College of Nurses in 2022. We've done that work. We have, through our work with the Ministry of Colleges and Universities, added more spaces for individuals who want to become healthcare professionals in the province of Ontario, including a Learn and Stay program that pays for their tuition and their books. As a result of those changes alone, we've already seen increases in the number of nurses and other healthcare professionals who are practicing in the province of Ontario. We are also, in the longer term, of course, 2 new medical schools are being built and planned in the GTA, historic new changes, because we understand our health population, Ontario is growing, and are aging. So we need to be prepared, but we're also doing some short and medium term goals to make sure that we have sufficient individuals who wish to practice in the province of Ontario.
I get that you want to get more nurses on those front lines, but school, even though that you're listing that as a short-term solution, that does take time to get people through school, get people trained and qualified for this. So if, you know, in the short term, when these changes are happening in the immediate term, as this is being rolled out, where will these facilities get staff if not from hospitals?
So again, we've already seen over 6,000 internationally educated nurses licensed in the province of Ontario in 2022. We have hundreds of people who want to practice in healthcare in Ontario. We've now worked with the colleges, whether it is the College of Physicians and Surgeons of Ontario or the College of Nurses of Ontario, to make sure that those applications are assessed and, if accurate, ultimately approved and licensed. So we've seen that work happening now, and that work will continue through those 2 colleges. But I wanted to highlight that we've done work both in the short term and the long term to make sure that Ontario is basically ready for the population increases and our aging population.
Do you think there's a crisis in frontline healthcare staffing right now in Ontario?
I think that there are individuals who have worked incredibly hard for over 2 years to make sure that we had a protected population. They were working through challenging
not to interrupt, but do you think there is a crisis? I get that the people who are working on the front lines are working incredibly hard, but do you think there is a staffing crisis in Ontario healthcare right now?
I think that there should be confidence in the fact that the government, your government, is looking after making sure that we have sufficient numbers coming through. We understand that it has been challenging, that it is very challenging and important work, but we've also seen how people and individuals have stepped up to do that work, and you have a government who's making sure that we have put the policies and changes in place to ensure individuals who want to practice in Ontario can do so. And, you know, Katie, we've seen it, because when we made changes with colleges and universities to expand the number of spaces for nurses and offer the Learn and Stay program, we've seen historic number of applications. So it is working. It will take time for some of these other changes, like training new nurses in colleges, but we've also seen it through historic numbers of applications and licenses being given in 2022.
As I move on to the next question, I'm going to note that you did not specifically answer that question. I'd like to play a clip for you of a guest we had on CBC News Network earlier today. It's from Dr. Steve Flindahl, a York Region emergency room physician. Have a listen.
There is not a lot of doctors and nurses sitting idle throughout the day or unemployed currently that are going to be able to fill these positions. They're already employed. All the surgeons in Ontario are actively working in hospitals funded by the public system. That's the only place they're going to get them.
What do you say to Dr. Flindahl?
Well, what I would say is we have existing systems in place with community surgery and diagnostic. We have over 800 facilities across Ontario, and all of those have stepped up and said, we would like to do more, we can do more. You know, I was at the Kensington Eye Institute with Premier Ford today, and they have already committed and have offered now cataract surgeries on Saturdays, which they weren't doing before they were funded. So we've put those changes in place to make sure that existing community surgery centers can operate more if they so choose, and individuals
Okay, so first things first, it's not surprising that she completely avoided that last question. There 100% is a staffing crisis within not just Ontario, but province-wide, or country-wide, sorry. It's a huge issue that, you know, we're not talking about or going over. It needs to be solved 100%. So I'm not really surprised that she completely avoided that question. She's more focused on trying to privatize your healthcare, Ontario.
And organizations like the Kensington Eye Institute have done that.
Now, you know, this is public money used to pay for procedures performed at private care facilities. Why not use this money instead to pay increases to nurses and other frontline workers?
Because they have rich friends that are going to be making money off of it.
Well, frankly, we have. We,
no,
of course,
you haven't.
Offered and gave the $5,000 incentive and retention bonus for nurses who are working full-time through the pandemic because we understand how challenging it has been. We have, through
God, she's so fucking bad.
$300 million was provided to Ontario hospitals who believed and knew that they could deal with some of the backlogs of surgeries and expand either the number of hours or the times that they were open. That has already happened. Those investments have occurred, and we're seeing those changes be very positively received.
As the Minister of Health, what is your position on doctors at private facilities upselling to patients?
Oh, man, I am curious to see what she's going to say. She's probably going to say, like, oh, it's disgusting and everything, but, you know, they're not publicly funded or anything, so it's completely fine. You know, they got to make some money, too. That's what I imagine she's probably going to say, something along those lines.
So I think it's important that we talk about patient options, and I will give some very...
Come on, bro! What the fuck? You have patient options within the fucking, like, public system. But you're not charged up the ass for that decision. Like, oh my god.
We can talk about that, but what is your position? What is your position as minister on doctors upselling at private facilities?
So I'm going to give you a very specific example, and that is, first of all, I want to reinforce safeguards already exist to ensure no extra charges for OHIP-funded services occur. However, upgrading of wheelchairs, perhaps choosing a private room over a semi-private room, or as it relates directly to cataract surgery, hospitals offering an upgraded lens as an option.
They don't do that, though. The quality of care in for-profit healthcare is significantly fucking worse than the public option. Like, come on, bro. Like, I am going to have a heated gamer moment if she continues this. Like, I swear to God.
That patients can choose but are not obligated to choose. Those exist in both the community surgery centers and our hospitals.
It's almost as bad as, like, the fucking American system at this point. I swear to God. Like, oh, this is so infuriating.
So you support the upselling of services at private facilities?
She essentially said yes.
Well, I wouldn't call it upselling of service.
It literally is upselling, you fucking buffoon. It literally is. Because, you know, all that stuff that, you know, is being upsold to patients is literally fucking free underneath the public option. Like, what the fuck are you talking about?
Options, because as I
well,
said,
it's options that's not, the thing is, it's options that's not necessarily available to everyone. People who don't have the funds to pay that extra money for that extra service, or we're talking about lenses. If there's a better opportunity for a better lens, you have to have the money to pay for it. So is that not creating a two-tier system where people who have...
I mean, first of all, we already do have a two-tier system. Look at dental, look at, like, literally the insurance industry within Canada that's provided by your employers. So, you know, that's a thing. But it will just exacerbate the fucking two-tiered system even more. Like, it's already dog shit, but it's gonna get worse. Like, honestly, I kind of wish that fucking Justin Trudeau would put his fucking foot down. But he's too spineless to actually do anything.
Of the money, and if that's what they want to do with their money, that's their prerogative and they want to do it. But does it not leave behind the people who can't afford it? That
Yes,
they don't
it does
get
leave
those
them
same
behind.
options as the people who can afford it.
It does leave them behind.
Respectfully, Katie, no. I've given you some very specific examples. When an individual chooses
I'm really struggling to not have a heated gamer moment. I swear to God. No, it leaves as we see time and time again with for-profit models, regardless of what it is, it will always leave behind the poor. That is just the truth. As well as, like, you know, it will also cause a vast majority of people to go into medical debt, which is just egregious to happen here. Like, I'm sorry, I don't want to be part of fucking America and their dog shit system. Like, I know you guys, like, you fucking clowns are, like, get paid out the ass by, like, your lobbyists and whatever. So you're perfectly fine, but like people like, say, myself or whoever would go into massive amounts of fucking medical debt just so your rich ass greedy fucker friends can make so much goddamn money off of it. Like, come on, bro. I swear to God. Like, it's so infuriating.
to decide whether they want a semi-private room or a private room. That is a patient option that they make.
And like, most people don't give a shit about having a private room or a semi-private room. It's only there to upsell and upsell and upsell. Like, oh my God.
But we're talking about lenses. Let's talk about the first example you brought up, lenses, when it comes to that cataract surgery. If people have the money, they can pay for a better option. If that is something that they will live with for the rest of their lives. If people have the money, they will do it. If they don't, they can't.
But these are options that are available to the patient with a conversation with their surgeon, with their family practitioner. They are optional. They are not absolute. And
yes, but guess what? If something provides a better outcome, people are going to want to go with the better outcome. That's just how that works. And upselling on, you know, say fucking lenses for cataracts, for example, it should not be a thing. Sorry, that's just the way that it should work. It's not their fault they have fucking cataracts. So why the fuck should these rich assholes make a shit ton of money off of people suffering? Sorry, we're not America. I know you want to be us to be as American as possible, but like, I don't give a shit. America is a third world country with a Gucci belt, and you can't change my mind on that.
again, safeguards already exist.
No, they do not.
Funded procedures occur, whether it is in hospital or in our existing cataract surgeries.
I'm just hoping you can give us some benchmarks for when you hope to see. What's a timeline here for when you hope to see improvement?
I love how the reporter is digging into her. I'm really glad that she's doing that. Like, honestly, good on whoever she is, on whatever her name is. Like, I honestly wish she would have dug a little bit deeper, but like, or like, you know, fucking criticized her more. But like, I completely am in agreement with her. Like, it's super infuriating, man. Oh my God.
So we've already given some expanded licenses in Ottawa, Kitchener-Waterloo, and Windsor, and we expect by March of 2023, so March of this year.
The thing that I want to say to all Ontarians is elect these fucking clowns out of office next time you have a chance. Like actually go out and vote and get these fucking clowns out of office. Because they're just flat out lying to your face. They don't give a shit about you, and they don't care if you become biomatter. Like, they're not upholding to like actual fucking public opinion. And like, honestly, at this point, like, blast their fucking asses on like you know, their phones and whatever. Like, fill up their inbox, tell them how, you know, fucking unpleased you are with them. And like, honestly, it's getting to the point where, you know, there might have to be like a nationwide protest about privatization of healthcare. because like this is not the future that anyone wants to live in. Like it's so stupid. Like it's so idiotic. And like I honestly don't think that, you know, fucking Lester B. Peterson would be too impressed with the way that, you know, the healthcare system is turning out to be. Like, come on, bro. Like, this is so infuriating. Like, America is the only other country that has fucking privatized healthcare, and it gets some dog shit results. Like, I don't think that's what fucking Pearson had in mind. Like, I don't... Like, I think, you know, Pearson kind of gave a shit about, you know, the people's, like healthcare and shit. A little bit.
We will be at pre-pandemic levels for our wait times.
Yeah, but guess what? That was still dog shit before the pandemic. Like, that's not something to be bragging about.
It's not good enough. We want to do better, which is why we're continuing to expand and offer proposals, assess proposals to see where there are other opportunities to deal with those wait times to decrease them. Look, at the end of the day, this is an individual patient who's waiting for cataract surgery and cannot be part of their community.
Yeah, and they're going to be waiting even fucking longer with for-profit private healthcare. Like, if you think that they're not, like, tell that to Saskatchewan and like how well their fucking for-profit healthcare went. Like, I swear to God, these fucking idiotic conservative premiers and politicians do not give a shit about anything at this point. They're just blatantly lying to everyone and pushing forward through their own fucking agenda, despite the fact that, you know, what they're doing is drastically unpopular, whether it be like the privatization of healthcare, the Alberta Sovereignty Act within United Canada, or other bullshit like that. Like, I swear to God.
In the full extent that they would want. I want to make sure that we get that access happening quickly.
Minister Jones, thank you very much for your time today.
Oh my God, she pissed me off so much.
The Prime Minister was asked about Ontario's plan today. Here's part of his response.
I hope he's pissed off as me.
We know how important it is to continue to invest in our healthcare systems, and I've had some great conversations with a number of premiers, including Premier Ford. And I can say we're all very much on the same page. There is a need for more money. There is a need for more delivery of results.
Opposition MPs have been listening in on my conversation with Minister Jones, and now they join me. France Shelley.
I hope that the Liberal MPPs and NDP MPPs tear the fucking tear her to fucking shreds. I swear to God, they better.
Lanai is the health critic for Ontario's NDP, and John Fraser is the interim leader of Ontario's Liberal Party. Mr. Fraser, I'm going to start with you. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau did not really have a negative word to say about Premier Ford's announcement. Do you share the position?
I'm not surprised, though.
As the Liberal Prime Minister?
Well, fucking Liberals are also dog shit.
I think I'm very concerned about what the government's proposing right now. We're not against independent health facilities, but we agree with Ontario's.
Why? Why not? Why not be against independent for-profit health facilities? They lead to worse outcomes than the public option, because in a for-profit system, their bottom line is money, not patient care.
Doctors, the College of Physicians, and hospitals, that they should be not-for-profit, that they should be connected to our healthcare system, that these independent facilities should not be paid more money than hospitals get for the same procedure. And as you mentioned earlier in your interview with Minister Jones, there's a real risk here to draining the best and the brightest out of our publicly funded hospitals.
He's right.
We're in a healthcare human resource crisis right now.
He's right. He is literally right.
Care for the people that we need. And setting up a parallel system is going to create some risks as far as that's concerned. And as well, your point about upselling, it was interesting that the minister could not, or the minister is quite happy with upselling.
Yeah, she calls it options, but what's the difference between options and upselling? Ms. Jelena,
Literally
Ontario
nothing.
NDP leader Merritt Stiles is against this plan.
Because when it comes down to like upselling, like in anything else, oh, it's just options. You have options, which is such bullshit.
But I'm wondering, let's take a look at this from the other perspective here. You know, do you think the current status quo is working? The surgery backlog is 206,000 deep. Do you not think it's time to try something new, to try and...
If anything, we need to be investing more into a public system, but as we see time and time again, you know, this we gave fucking idiotic states rights to all these fucking provinces, and clearly they're not doing anything about it, considering that they have a surplus, or some of them have a surplus of like $12 billion of unspent medical funds. Like, it's so fucking disgusting.
And end that.
Well, the status quo is that we have a government that underfunds our not-for-profit hospitals. We have a government that demoralizes our health.
True, and if you want to privatize something that's public, the best way to do so is underfund it and undermine it and prop up of like, oh, like, obviously the fucking public option isn't working well, so we gotta turn to the corporations to do it, right? No, the fucking corporations can stay the fuck out of my healthcare. I don't trust them enough with, like, preparing my food. Why the fuck would I trust them with my healthcare?
Care workers with Bill 124 and the way that they are going to court to continue with that bill. So am I in favor of the status quo? No, absolutely not. But does that mean that the only solution is to make a private for-profit clinic? No, absolutely not. Many hospitals would be quite happy to use all of the sitting idle infrastructure, that is all of their surgical suite that they don't use at night, they don't use on weekend, they don't use on stats or holiday, they don't use starting at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Why? Because they don't have the resources to keep them open. They have the surgeons willing to work, they have the list of patients needing those procedures, but they have no resources. Why don't we give the resources to our not-for-profit hospital so that they can rise up to the challenge and work on this?
Because they have investors within the fucking private for-profit system that, you know, a lot of their fucking rich friends and lobbyists, and even some of them, I imagine even some of them themselves have stakes in it as well. So I'm not really surprised that they're not doing anything about it.
Huge backlog of surgery. The minister mentioned the $300 million they gave them this summer.
Like, I honestly swear to, honest to God, Noam Chomsky was fucking right about this. Like, you know, if you undermine and underfund shit, it's the best way to privatize shit. Like Noam Chomsky was 100% right about that.
It worked. It brought down the huge wait list to about what we were at before the pandemic.
Which was also pretty dog shit.
Without building a single for-profit surgical suite. We did that with our not-for-profit hospitals. Why don't we change the status quo through investment into our not-for-profit hospital and respecting of our healthcare workers?
Because we don't give a shit about...
I want to put the same question to you. Do you not see the need for the government to try to shake things up and try at least new methods to try and get these wait times down?
Well, a good method would be investing in our publicly funded hospitals who have the capacity to do this and have the capacity to work with partners to do it. You know, one of the things that concerns me is the Premier says, you know, you only have to use your OHIP card. You'll never have to use your credit card. But the reality is right now...
Despite the fact that that hasn't been true, people have been using to have to use their credit card because their OHIP card was not accepted at these fucking for-profit clinics.
Now in Ontario, families are having to use their credit card to access basic primary virtual services because the government cut the funding. And and to jump a queue for a wait for a cataract, if someone just says, look, you can...
And that's another thing that's disgusting. If you have a lot more money than like anyone else, guess what? You can jump the queue. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you were waiting like say 9 months to get your cataracts done. This rich asshole needs cataracts done too. So, and he has more money and is apparently more important than you, who's driving a bus to get kids to school or whatever.
can come to my clinic next week and pay $3,000. You don't have to wait a few months. So, I'm concerned that the government is setting up a parallel system here, and that the premier is saying you don't have to worry, it's not going to cost you more money. I mean, it's the same premier who said, "Don't worry, I'm not going to crack open the greenbelt."
True, he's
so
right.
I don't think we can trust this government and this premier with ensuring that our publicly funded healthcare system is strong, and that the only shareholder that counts is the patient.
Ms. Jelena, you sort of hinted at this in your previous answer, but if there are a couple of specific things that you would like to see the Ontario government do to tackle wait times, what would they be? Give me your top 2 suggestions for what that could be.
Well, first, invest in our not-for-profit hospitals. I live in Northern Ontario. The hospital is called Health Sciences North at Sudbury. They have surgical suites that sits idle all the time because they don't have the resources. We have longer wait lists in Northern Ontario than Southern Ontario, and yet we have infrastructure that sits idle. Fund our hospital so that they can take on more clients. And as I said, respect the people who work in healthcare. Bill 124 is something that the nurses...
Bill 124 is complete dog shit. And like anyone who supports that bill is just a fucking idiot.
Pushed against really hard. They won in court, and now the court judged this bill unconstitutional, and now the government is appealing this court judgment. Nurses feel so disrespected. They gave us 110% for the 3 years of this pandemic. They worked really, really hard. And how do we thank them? By disrespecting them, by feeling them that they have no value, that they're expendable, and they're quitting in drove. We have tens of thousands of vacancy. We have 152 hospital corporations in Ontario.
Yeah, and guess what? If you tell people to leave if they don't like it, people are gonna fucking leave, and that's exactly what we've been seeing.
Every single one of them have vacancies that they can't fill. Respect them.
Mr. Fraser, I'm going to put that last same question to you. If you were to pick 2 points, what would you say the government should be doing in order to ease these backlogs and these wait times?
Well, look, I think we should have a not-for-profit, publicly funded independent health facilities that are connected to our hospitals. I think that's a good thing. We should not have private for-profit corporations owning those. Number 2 is we have a lot of capacity in our healthcare system. And operating rooms, just as France just said, in hospitals across Ontario that are not being used at different times during the week. We need to use those. And the best way to do that is to help solve our healthcare human resource crisis. Appealing Bill 124, the ruling on Bill 124 is the wrong thing. It's sending the wrong message to the people on the front lines. Nurses are leaving the front lines in droves. Maybe they're still registered as nurses, but they feel very disrespected. And I think that's what the government should do. That'll go a long way to help with reducing wait times if they could just do that.
All right. I want to thank both of you, France Gélinas, the Ontario NDP health critic, and John Fraser, the interim Ontario Liberal leader. Thank you both.
Ugh, that really made me mad. Get into some articles now. Maybe that will help calm me down a little bit. As Ontario moves to allow private clinics to perform more surgeries, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau said he'll be watching to ensure the principles of Canada's universal public system are respected. It is one of the primary responsibilities of the federal government in matters of healthcare delivery to ensure that the Canada Health Act is always respected, Trudeau told reporters at an event in Saskatchewan on Monday, referring to the law that outlines Canada's publicly funded healthcare insurance system and spells out national health policy objectives. That's what we're going to continue to watch across the country as people are responding in different ways to delivering better service to Canadians in healthcare, Trudeau said. Which, no, they're all doing the exact same thing and using the exact same fucking arguments. On Monday, Ontario revealed a 3-step plan that will see some for-profit community surgical and diagnostic centers take on certain additional surgeries for other medical procedures with the aim to reduce the province's surgery backlog, resulting in considerable wait times for patients. During the announcement, Ontario Premier Doug Ford indicated the upcoming changes to the system would be permitted. While not stating whether he supports Ford's move, the Prime Minister said he and the Premiers are very much on the same page when it comes to the healthcare system needing more investment and, as a result, improved care for Canadians. Whether we're talking about more access to primary care doctors and teams, whether it's quicker access to mental health supports, whether it's reducing surgery backlogs, there's a lot of things we're working on with the provinces, Trudeau said. Ford's announcement caught the eye of federal NDP leader Jagmeet Singh, who sounded alarm bells in a statement claiming that Ford was heading part of Ontario's healthcare system over to for-profit corporations and at the expense of patients. He's right. World-class healthcare should be waiting for when you need it. We can still deliver the best by rebuilding and growing our public system, not allowing conservative premiers to discriminate it with American-style for-profit health corporations, Singh said. He's also right on that. The NDP leader called for Trudeau to make protecting the universal health care system a condition in any future increase in federal health transfers. We 100% should do that. Asked on Monday about the status of the deal with the provinces over increasing the Canada Health Transfer, which some premiers have recently voiced optimism about, Trudeau said he's looking forward to being able to announce positive steps forward in the very near future. The premiers are asking for Ottawa to boost transfers to 35% up from the current 22% of coverage for healthcare costs, while Trudeau has insisted that any increase in the federal funds would have to come with a concrete plan for provincial accountability, which I don't blame him for. Like, we 100% should. Singh also raised concerns over the potential impact on care and attempts to upsell patients when profits are priority. Trudeau is ready to let the provinces funnel funds federal healthcare dollars into the pockets of for-profit corporate investors. I am not, Singh said. When it comes to privatization, healthcare experts have warned about the possibilities of exacerbated staffing shortages in hospitals, arguing that investing in independent centers and squeezing resources from the public sector. During an interview with CTV News Winnipeg on Friday, Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre said he does not support privatization of healthcare when it comes to essential needs. Yeah, bullshit. Of course he does. He 100% does. Let's be honest. We have a public system that I support. I believe everyone should be able to get public health care. That's the system I relied on my whole life, and I think it's the system that we need to preserve. A system that gives public insurance for all the basic necessities of our healthcare, he said. Poilievre said that if he were Prime Minister, he would work with the provinces on ensuring Canadians get prompt publicly funded care for their essential needs while calling the current system a complete disaster. Yeah, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says Federal Health Minister Yves Ducos was right in saying that there is still lots to do before reaching a deal with the provinces for increased healthcare funding, but that he's confident in those two levels of government will go there. Yeah, I doubt it. I honestly doubt it. Like if we've seen time and time again, like the premiers just do not give a shit at this point. Like they've just completely given up and like actually pretending to care. So they're just pushing their fucking own agendas regardless of how unpopular their decisions are. I'm glad that the health minister is pointing out there's still a lot of work to do, because there is, but I'm also very pleased to be able to say I am confident that we're going to get to a good place, because premiers have been hearing the same things that I have, Trudeau said during an event in Windsor, Ontario on Tuesday. Earlier in the day, Duclos said there is still lots of work to do before reaching a deal, despite increasing indications from other key players that the federal government is nearing a funding agreement in exchange for improvements to the system, seeming to pour some cold water on the prospect of being very close in agreement on increasing Canada's health transfer. Delcos told reporters that on Prince Edward Island on Tuesday that there is something both sides will have to keep working with on in the weeks to come. Lots of work still needs to be done before we come to an agreement on the importance of those results and how we're going to achieve them, Delcos said, speaking about 5 categories of healthcare improvements for the federal government wants to see tried to any funding boost. The 5 metrics, Delcos said the federal government wants the provinces to commit to results on are access to family health teams, reduced backlogs in surgeries and diagnostics, retaining, recruiting, and recognizing the credentials of healthcare workers, investing in mental health, and modernizing the system so medical records can be shared with various providers electronically. So yes, we are looking. We are all looking forward to a final agreement at some point, but we are all very mindful, and there's still lots of work to do before we get there, Delco said. Asked on Monday about the status of the talks and getting provinces to sign on to an agreement with strings attached, which some premiers have recently voiced a willingness to do, Trudeau said he's looking forward to being able to announce positive steps forward in the very near future. Asked to clarify what the status of the deal is giving the contrast comments on its immense, the Prime Minister said that both true and that progress is being made and that more work is needed to see a deal finalized. Trudeau said that there has been a lot of hard work done over the last few months to make sure that any increase in funding does come with an understanding from the provinces that the money goes towards ensuring the system is able to respond not just to the challenges that we just lived through over the past couple of years, but the challenges that are coming as well. I'm looking forward to continuing our work and delivering for Canadians soon, he said. Seeing the federal government commit to increasing Canada's health transfer, which funnels federal dollars into the province or into provincial healthcare systems to 35% from the current 22% of coverage for healthcare costs, has been a long-standing demand of the premiers. Yeah, but they want it with no strings attached. But in the recent months, the premiers have been ramping up pressure for Trudeau to meet with them to discuss an increase as hospitals and healthcare facilities appear to be in crisis mode. Yeah, I wonder why that is. And, he did said that he would be willing to meet with the premiers. It's just that they don't want to meet with him if there's strings attached to the money that they're going to be getting. From staffing shortage and a cold weather surge of illness compounding extended wait times in emergency rooms, there to hundreds of thousands of surgeries and medical procedures backlogged due in part to COVID-19 cancellations. There are steady calls from those in the sector for urgent action as Canada's population continues to grow in age. In agreeing that the system is strained, if not broken, Trudeau has said that the federal government is willing to go beyond the one-time top-ups offered by the provinces during the pandemic, and they agree to sell billions more. However, Trudeau has been willing to pull up a chair with the premiers until there was a more concrete plan for provincial accountability on the table, which I don't blame him for. While some premiers initially pushed back on the idea of federal conditions in recent interviews on CTV News channels Power Play and in press conferences, certain premiers have signaled a willingness to agree to conditions and an undertaking of accountability in exchange for more money. On Tuesday, Quebec Health Minister Christian Dubois told reporters that he is quite encouraged by the current states of talks. The fact that we're talking about a meeting of the premiers and the Prime Minister, I think, is very encouraging, he said. The discussion that I had with our premier is very encouraging. Even with Duclos signaling it could take weeks still before a deal is ready to be finalized, the healthcare funding talks appear to have come a long way from November, when an in-person meeting between Duclos and the provincial health ministers ended in acrimony, with Duclos blaming the breakdown on the premiers, telling their ministers to stop negotiating. Yeah, I mean, it 100% falls on the fucking premiers. It does. On Tuesday, the federal health minister said the two sides have worked very hard and quite well over the last year to try and map out how to address the healthcare sector's challenges, pointing to the more than a dozen meetings he had with his provincial counterparts. In an interview with CTV News's channel's Power Play with Vasa Kelopos on Tuesday, Internal Governmental Affairs Minister Dominic LeBlanc said it's fair to say that Saskatchewan's Premier Scott Moe said on the program on Monday that an agreement is much closer compared to a month ago. I was heartened by his comments last night. If you think of a month ago or 4 months ago, I think the circumstance is a lot better to get to the right place for Canadians and ensure the healthcare system is world class, is sustainable, and is accessible, which is obviously a concern that we're seeing in many jurisdictions across the country, big and small, LeBlanc said. My God, this is so long. Should weeks be the time frame for the deal to be ready for Trudeau's consideration, it is possible to that an agreement could come to fruition ahead of the 2023 federal budget, which typically is presented in early spring. Whether the agreement would be for the full 13% share increase of the premiers are after to be seen. Even a more modest boost to how much the federal government is willing to put into provincial coffers would likely come with a multi-billion-dollar price tag. LeBlanc wouldn't confirm whether the federal government is willing to offer up the full amount premiers are after. Obviously, that is the kind of conversation that we're having with the provinces. I don't think anybody's landed on a precise quantum yet, said LeBlanc, declining to elaborate publicly on the kind of dollar figures being discussed in private. That said, LeBlanc noted that in recent days, the federal government has sensed a desire amongst all orders of government to get to the right place quickly. In the meantime, some provinces have announced plans to forge ahead with initiatives to address their specific healthcare system's needs. The most recent example is Ontario Premier Doug Ford, who on Monday announced that his province is moving to allow private for-profit clinics to perform more surgeries with the aim of reducing what are now lengthy wait times for certain medical procedures. This move is revive after private. This move has revived the privatization debate and raised questions over whether it contravenes the Canada Health Act, which ensures all eligible residents a reasonable access to publicly funded healthcare services in order to maintain eligibility for their full Canada health transfer. Provinces are required to uphold the Act's criteria and ensure there is no extra billing and user charges for insured health services. Having driven the public hospitals into the worst staffing crisis that we've ever seen, and underfunding them, like every large hospital in the province is operating rooms that don't operate at full capacity, why not open them up to capacity? Why not support our public hospitals? Why rebuild the public cost in the private for-profit clinics? There's already vacant that already violate Canada's health care laws, said the Ontario Collaboration Executive Director Natalie Marin in an interview to CTV News Channel on Mondays. Ford's announcement also caught the ire of federal NDP leader Jagmeet Singh, who is calling on Trudeau to make protecting the universal public health care system a condition of any future increase to the federal health transfer. He wants to see Trudeau withhold funding from Ontario for moving to allow more private delivery. The real question is where does the Premier or the Prime Minister stand if he says we're going to defend the public healthcare system, and he's allowing this to happen in Ontario? To me, it looks like the Prime Minister is not interested in defending the public healthcare, which I think is very wrong, Singh said in an interview to CTV News' Power Play on Tuesday. Singh wouldn't say whether or not he'd be willing to pull out of the Liberal NDP supply and confidence deal with the Prime Minister. Doesn't heed his calls, suggesting generally that his party will continue to look to use the agreement to leverage progressive wins. Ford's announcement also caught the ire of federal NDP leader Jagmeet Singh, who is calling on Trudeau to protect the public healthcare system, a condition of any further increase to the federal healthcare. World-class healthcare should be waiting for when you need it. We can best deliver that by rebuilding and growing our public system, not allowing conservative premiers to just focus on like American style shit. Like it's pretty much like the exact same article as we just read. Okay, let's move on to the Italian mobster shit or mafia shit. So those who don't know, a huge mafia leader was arrested in Italy. So
si comprende che le condizioni economiche del latitante erano discrete, buone, ma questo lo sapevamo, quindi arredamento ricercato, oggetti di un certo tenore, non proprio di lusso, ma di un apprezzabile livello economico. Le indagini e quindi la perquisizione, gli accertamenti sono in corso. Si proseguirà prossimamente con l'evidenza di tracce biologiche, quella è la prima cosa. Verificare eventuali nascondigli o intercapedini o posti dove può esserci nascosto della documentazione, ma è un lavoro che occorreranno giorni, non è che in 2 ore o in un giorno si riesce ad avere un quadro completo di una situazione che è complessa e che necessita di tutte le verifiche meticolose che stiamo facendo in sintonia, ovviamente in stretto collegamento con l'autorità giudiziaria. E abbiamo degli accertamenti in corso, abbiamo delle evidenze che ci portano a dire che erano almeno 6 mesi che abitiamo in questa parte. Ma Campobello di Mazara fa parte del mandamento di Castelvetrano, costituisce è una famiglia mafiosa che negli anni, anzi nei decenni, ha dimostrato una particolare efficacia ed efficienza all'interno del contesto mafioso del mandamento di Castelvetrano, con soggetti mafiosi di grande spessore che hanno affiancato le attività criminali del latitante. Quindi è un'area che si presta bene in quanto vi è la presenza di una storica e ben strutturata famiglia mafiosa ed è molto vicina, quasi attaccata al suo paese di origine.
Già ieri mattina, quando è arrivata, io lavoro nella scuola primaria con dei bambini di 9 anni e abbiamo comunicato loro questa notizia, perché tanto a casa avrebbero sicuramente sentito qualcosa, e l'abbiamo commentato con loro dicendo che è un momento molto importante per noi. Mi dispiace soltanto che il nome di questo nostro paese venga alla ribalta per questi fattacci.
Se non cambierà mai la mentalità mafiosa, non cambierà mai nulla. Quindi tutto sta nella mentalità che abbiamo noi. Se non cambia la mentalità, non cambierà mai nulla.
Per quanto riguarda me, penso sia una cosa abbastanza positiva per la Sicilia e per i paesotti, insomma, siciliani.
Okay.
After spending 3 decades
not too terribly much. A little bit sad I couldn't find Engage today.
On the run,
It's a little bit unfortunate.
Italy's #1 fugitive, convicted mafia boss Matteo Messina Denaro has been arrested.
GR. Nice.
Officials say he was captured at a clinic where he was receiving treatment for an undisclosed medical condition. Messina Denaro, who was tried in absentia and convicted of dozens of
Nice. I hope you've been enjoying it.
murders, faces multiple life sentences. He is said to be imprisoned for 2 bombings in Sicily in 1992 that killed.
Wait, what? Damn, bro. That's 2 bombings? Jesus. Haven't even played it. Oh, I thought you would have played it a little bit for sure. What's GR?
2 anti-mafia prosecutors.
The arrest is a very, very important event. Obviously, Mr. Matteo Messina Denaro is the keeper of fundamental secrets in very delicate matter, as for example, the reasons of the most serious mafia crimes or the possible
General Leaf? I don't know. I don't know if we have it here.
connivance between political subjects and mafia leaders. So now we have to consider, and this is the basic question, what will happen? Will he cooperate with the judicial authority or not? We have to consider which are the subsequent results of this fundamental arrest. Matteo Messina.
I'm kind of surprised that they actually caught him, and it took this long to actually get him. My man's wild.
Denaro is for sure a leader, a chief.
And like, how can I not make fun of Italians when, you know, one of their main mob bosses is Caponaro? Did I get a copy of Fire Emblem Engage? No, I wasn't able to find it at the store today. I might be able to get it tomorrow.
Of the mafia organization, and so it could take advantage in all these years of a lot of supports, coverages, supporting activities at the local context in Sicilia, and this is
sold out? No, I don't think so. I don't think they even carried it today, which is really weird, because I was able to find more obscure games on release day when they came out.
the reason why it has been so difficult to arrest him, and this is the reason why it is so important finally to achieve this kind of result. This arrest is also a sign of redemption for the Italian institution, at the same time a sign of faith for the young generation. The Italian institutions are able to stop and to arrest the persons who are liable of very serious crimes.
Finally got him, boys. Okay.
Sicilians have waited for this day for nearly 30 years. The man called the last of the Godfathers, Matteo Messina Denaro, arrested.
Godfather, eh?
After police surprised him in a private clinic.
Honestly, I think they should have just arrested him on Christmas. I think that would have been a lot more entertaining.
He was being treated for cancer, raising questions about how Italy's most wanted evaded arrest for so long in plain sight.
I mean, clearly he's smart.
For sure, a leader, a chief,
right?
The mafia organization, and so it could take advantage in all these years of a lot of supports, coverages, supporting activities at the local context in Sicilia.
Nicknamed Diabolic, Messina Denaro once bragged he'd filled a cemetery all by himself.
Damn, bro.
He was sentenced in absentia to life in prison for the 1992 bombing murders of Italy's most beloved anti-mafia heroes, prosecutors Giovanni Falcone and Paolo Borsellino, and found guilty for helping plan bomb attacks in Florence, Rome, and Milan. That left 10 people dead. And most shocking of all, for ordering the young son of a mafioso turned.
Today's the day the game comes out. Yeah. Yeah, today is the day it comes out. Probably won't be able to play it until like Sunday though. Which sucks because it honestly looks a lot of fun, and I've been having a lot of fun with the units and Fae as well.
State witness to be strangled and dissolved in a vat of acid.
Damn, bro.
It's a day of celebration, says Italy's Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni of Messina Denaro's arrest. Sicilians, whose region has long been in a mafia stranglehold, agree. Megan Williams, CBC News, Rome.
I'm sure there's like more to this than what like the public or what like mainstream media is giving. Right? Definitely. Italy's highest profile mafia target only tells us where to find him about 20 minutes before we met. Nicola Gattinari was a professor leading the country's fight to against organized crime, has learned to live in constant danger, and too much advance warning leaves him exposed. Bro, like, what the fuck has been going on in Italy for like the last like couple months? Like, ever since they elected that new fascist leader, it's been kind of wild in Italy. We are instructed to wait for him outside of the court in the southern region of Calabara, where he is overseeing the biggest trial of its kind since the 1980s. More than 330 suspects have been testifying there, and 70 of them have already been convicted. Suddenly, Gattinari sweeps in, surrounding by his escort of 5 police cars. We thank him a few times for his readiness to meet and talk. Stop thanking me and let me go on with it. He snapped. There's nothing I hate more than dead time. Do I have voice chat? In what? The man on the kill list of Italy's most powerful mafia is... Bro, what? I don't know. I hate Italians because they speak like this, and they have such weird names like Carbonara. Who has devoted his entire career to taking on the group, does not represent the pleasantries, and then he decides to drive us to his office 40 minutes away. He will be freer to talk to there. We climb into his bulletproof car and began perhaps Italy's most dangerous commute. Discord? Yeah, I believe so, right? I believe Discord does so. I've been living with this level of security since 1989, when my fiance's house was shot at, and someone phoned her in the night to tell her she was marrying a dead man. He recalls it escalated to reach the suffering level of control. Nah, it's fine. I'll probably be leaving shortly anyways. After like a couple things. A couple more things I want to get to. Damn, bro, I don't really care about all this fucking history right now. How long is this one? Feel fairly long. I don't really feel like reading a bunch of shit.
as Pierre Poilievre tries to win over Quebecers, a hint at where he's starting from. No political slogan on his lectern. Instead, he simply wants people to know his name.
We have a new leader, the Honorable Pierre Poilievre.
That's despite a landslide leadership win where he clobbered former Quebec Premier Jean Charest.
Once he became leader, he almost went into hibernation and didn't seem to kind of...
The funny thing is he's also like drastically unpopular with women too, which I find kind of funny.
Seized the opportunity that presented itself to get himself known.
And while his poll numbers have grown in several provinces, he's struggling in this key battleground.
There is no Pierre Poilievre effect in terms of voting intentions in the province.
Generations of Conservative leaders have tried making special appeals to Quebec. Stephen Harper recognized the Québécois as a nation. Erin O'Toole promised more powers on matters like immigration, winning him an endorsement from Quebec's popular premier.
C'est une bonne approche, l'approche de M. O'Toole.
But that didn't change Conservative fortunes in the province. Poilievre was asked what he would do to appeal to Quebecers.
Quelle est votre optique pour séduire les Québécois?
Mais je respecte l'autonomie du Québec.
Poilievre says he respects Quebec's autonomy, adding Quebecers share the concerns of the rest of Canada, like inflation, taxes, and government spending.
And
sure he does.
End up a very well yielding electoral success for him, so long as the economy is the top issue during the next general election campaign.
Though it's in Quebec that his attacks on Justin Trudeau are least likely to land.
In all of our polling, the province of Quebec is where that anti-Trudeau sentiment is the lowest.
Now, you can win a majority government without a big showing in Quebec. Stephen Harper did it in 2011. But the Conservatives have long felt that a swath of seats around Quebec City could be theirs. And those are the kind of numbers
very doubtful.
Make or break a government.
Very, very doubtful that they would actually gain like any sort of notoriety from that. Like the Conservatives are just becoming more and more unpopular by the day.
Nova Scotia healthcare.
So there was a little bit of an update on the stuff that was going on within Nova Scotia's healthcare system after that healthy woman died. So let's take a look.
Leaders presenting a united front.
My message to all the leaders here today was just go like hell.
Oh, I thought his name was Horton. I'm like, bro, this guy owns Tim Hortons? What a wild time to live in. Oh, I just can't read, apparently.
This is not us, we, they problem. It's an our problem. It's your problem. It's Nova Scotians' problem.
Unions, professional associations, schools, and government spent the day in talks, working to fix a system that's in crisis.
So I heard a resounding commitment around the table across all partners.
If there's a hurdle that was in your way, let's talk about it.
This after a week of horrifying healthcare stories. 37-year-old Allison Holtoff and 67-year-old Charlene Snow both died after going to rural emergency rooms and not receiving care quickly enough.
She said, I feel like I'm dying. They're going to let me die here. And I just told her, like, no, that's why I got you in the hospital.
I struggle with the fact that she went in for emergency care and didn't receive it.
Unsurprising.
At the emergency room where Snow waited for hours, 80% of licensed practical nurses' jobs are vacant. It's part of a debilitating shortage. Not a new problem and not an easy one to fix.
The crisis that we're seeing and now hearing about anecdotally is really the symptom of problems that have existed in the healthcare system for years. And none of this should be new.
I think this is because some of the negative stories that have been coming out lately. We see a premier call a summit and then invite the media here, and of course it's short on details.
The premier says there's a plan, but didn't elaborate.
We know that coming out of that, the conversation was good, but we know that coming out of that there needs to be some action, and everyone's on that page.
The province is promising more details tomorrow as the premier moves to rebuild the public's trust in a healthcare system he campaigned on fixing. Kate McKenna, CBC
Yeah, but he hasn't really done it yet, though. So, Bolsonaro and Trump riots, they're very, very similar. Let's watch the breakdown.
It was a scene reminiscent of January 6th in Washington. Thousands of rioters storming Brazil's institutions of power on Sunday smashed their way into Congress, the presidential palace, and the Supreme Court just days after the inauguration of a new president. Supporters of defeated far-right President Jair Bolsonaro, the protesters were fueled by his repeated claims of election fraud.
An obvious and clear attack on a democratic process, and we condemn it, of course.
Top Brazilian officials have been arrested. Police are alleged to be complicit as well. Bolsonaro is in Florida, still refusing to acknowledge defeat.
He was still in Florida, bro?
So to what extent
Automatic
was all of
L.
this inspired by what happened in the United States? And what about concerns that there could be another attack? Let's bring in two journalists from Brazil to break this down for us. Gustavo Ribeiro is in Sao Paulo, and Guilherme Waltenberg joins us from Brasilia. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you.
Come to Brazil.
You were in the newsroom, but your camera operator was in the middle of the riot, attacked repeatedly. Describe for us what happened to him.
Well, basically, he was covering the demonstration that at first was not a violent one. But then when the demonstrators started invading the public buildings, he was trying to take pictures and film the whole situation. And the demonstrators were not okay with that. So some 5 or 6 guys surrounded him and tried to grab his equipment. He fought back and he was able to keep his equipment, but then he wasn't able to film the whole assault and the whole thing while it was going on. Basically, when a journalist is attacked while he's doing his work, democracy itself has been attacked, because to be able to well-inform population is one of the pillars of democracy itself.
And how is he doing now?
He's doing good. He wasn't very badly hurt, so he's back to work. He's already covering the whole political scenario in Brazil.
Gustavo, as I understand it, there were lots of warnings that this could happen. So why is it that authorities seemed unprepared?
Well, in the eyes of law enforcement, in the eyes of the Supreme Court, it was a malicious and criminal collusion. Actually, the Supreme Court placed under investigation the former top security official in Brasilia and ordered his arrest for believing that he deliberately underprepared the city to deal with these protests, and in many ways allowed the scenes that we saw on Sunday happen.
And Guilherme, why would he be underprepared and allow this to happen? What would be the motive?
Well, in my opinion, a combination of 3 factors led to the loss of control over the demonstrators. The first one is that both the local and the federal government underestimated the strength of Bolsonaro radical supporters. A few days earlier, Lula had the biggest inauguration of all times. He brought around 150,000 people to his inauguration. So him and his supporters understood that Bolsonaro and his supporters were a part of the past. And as we saw, they were not. And the second part of it is that the police force supported them while they were trying to invade public buildings. There are many videos showing the policemen helping demonstrators move toward public buildings. And the last reason, I understand, is the same one as Gustavo just mentioned, the sort of support of the Secretary of Public Security from Brasilia. He left Brazil one day before the demonstrations, and he now has a warrant for his arrest once he steps back in Brazil.
Here's a question again for both of you, and I'll begin with Gustavo. I mean, from a Canadian perspective, and I think for the States as well, it all seems so similar to what happened in the United States, and Bolsonaro seems so similar to Trump making claims of election fraud, and then we see what happened last Sunday. So, Gustavo, to what extent do you think there is this direct line between Trump and Bolsonaro in this regard?
Well, I think it's impossible not to make this connection, because Bolsonaro has borrowed a lot of pages from Donald Trump's playbook, from insisting in this sort of big lie narrative that Brazil's electronic voting system can be rigged without ever offering any shred of evidence to support his claims. He employed many Trumpian style of narratives, and we have found out yesterday that he had it was found with the former Brazilian security officer, who, by the way, was Bolsonaro's former justice minister, a draft decree that, if enacted, would at least would want to give the Bolsonaro the power to overturn the election. Not to go too much into the weeds, it was a sort of intervention into the electoral courts. And this, to make the Trump comparison, bears a lot of resemblance to Trump's bid to get Georgia authorities to, quote unquote, find himself enough votes to win the election.
And Guillermo, do you want to add anything to that?
Well, basically, I think Trump serves as an inspiration for Bolsonaro, and that has never been a secret. But Bolsonaro has a personality of his own as well. And unlike Trump, he wasn't personally into the mob, and he wasn't, during the riot, he was not tweeting or doing anything. He was just quiet and waiting for his time. But we know that his son, Eduardo, who's a congressman in Brazil, is really close to Steve Bannon. So, yes, definitely, they inspired what happened in Brazil.
And Guillermo, the military, as I understand, is on high alert this weekend in Brazil. What are you hearing about the possibility of another attack?
Well, I don't think something like that is going to happen again, especially because the federal government has made an intervention in public security in Brasilia, the capital city of Brazil. So if in the past, if a week ago, one of the reasons why the demonstrators were able to invade public buildings and what they did was because there was a lack of control over the police force, it is not going to happen again, because now the police force is under the control of the federal government, who is basically the main target of those demonstrators.
And Gustavo, maybe I'll finish with this for Canadians who are watching, who are potential tourists, thinking about visiting Brazil or do business in Brazil. Do they have any reason to be concerned about the instability in your country?
Well, I agree with Guilherme. I don't think we're going to see anything of the magnitude of January the 8th. I think that for tourists, the dangers are very reduced because they're not trying to create this general sense of violence, but rather intimidate the government. So I wouldn't think that for tourists that there is a major issue, other than problems with violence that we already have.
We don't hear a lot in Canada about the politics of Brazil, so I really appreciate both of you giving us your insights tonight. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Alberta Premier Danielle Smith says no to COVID-19 pardons.
Premier says she's no longer exploring a pardon for people who violated COVID-19 public health rules because Canada's legal system doesn't work like it does in the States. She made the statement Monday on the Sean Newman podcast.
Some people think that a premier has the same power as they do in the States of clemency or pardons, and I've not observed that that's the case in Canada.
Smith also says politicians need to be hands-off once the justice system gets involved. A firmer stance than last week when Smith said she'd been talking to prosecutors about COVID-19 rule-breaker cases and how those cases should proceed.
I do want to make sure that they have an independent process for assessing that, but I ask them on a regular basis as new cases come out, is it in the public interest to pursue, and is there a reasonable likelihood of conviction?
Since then, she said imprecise language led to confusion. On Monday, saying once the wheels of justice roll, there isn't anything a politician can do.
Yeah, there is.
Law professor Lorian Hardcastle says
they do it all the time.
There is some precedent for it federally. Certainly provincially, there's no legislative structure currently in place that would address this.
The opposition NDP says it remains concerned about any potential conversations between Smith and Alberta Justice. Irfan Sabir sent a formal request to the Justice Minister, asking for an independent investigation to determine if the Premier interfered in the justice system.
Must have trust and confidence that prosecutorial decisions are entirely free of political interference and bias.
The Alberta Crown Prosecution Service says no legal matters have been discussed between Smith and prosecutors. Thus, the Justice Minister's office says no further action is required. But Hardcastle says Smith's wide-ranging comments have left public confidence in jeopardy, and an investigation could clear that up.
The Premier should continue to take the temperature of Albertans in terms of where they are on this issue.
Morgan Black, Global News.
Okay. Last one.
From electric vehicles to smartphones, critical minerals are at the heart of future technological advances, and Canada is trying to become a world leader.
Canada has incredible amounts of the critical minerals and the rare earth elements that the world needs.
The
Not
feds
as much
have
as
pledged
like
$3.8 billion to help the sector fund exploration and to cover
Congo.
the cost of new applications to the government. It's speeding up the approval process that the industry says will be key to future growth.
A more focused review that looks at those aspects that are absolutely critical and unique about that project, and not looking at everything under the sun, would make for a more streamlined process.
The first step of that new plan in action today, with the Impact Assessment Agency of Canada announcing they've approved an environmental review of a lithium mine in northern Quebec. The James Bay mine, which is hoping to open in 2024, is now subject to 271 conditions around wildlife and Indigenous rights.
It will give some of our allies some confidence that we are able to, attract investment, get some approvals, move through the regulatory process. But in terms of meeting what we need to accomplish with our strategy, we need about 10 times more of these.
Canada has only one other lithium mine, which is owned by a Chinese firm that ships all of its material back to China. Beijing dominates this space, with a third of the world's nickel, over half of the...
And also, like, a lot of Chinese imperialism within Africa as well. Like, the thing is that, the U.S. essentially just let China have the cobalt and lithium mines because they were primarily used for, like, coloring pots and shit. Despite the fact that China thought ahead to, like, EVs and stuff. Which, it's still imperialism, which is still fucking disgusting, so.
Lithium and 87% of rare earth elements that has helped drive their manufacturing sector.
China has been in that space for a long time, and it could have been beneficial for us.
Ending reliance on China could be big business, with the International Energy Agency estimating demand for critical minerals could increase sixfold by 2040. That opportunity spurred the Prime Minister to visit Asia in late 2022. Pitching allied countries that Canada could help provide raw materials to help shift away from China.
So they're not like our companies that are publicly traded, that are profit sensitive, that have to make money. China can invest for strategic reasons.
The James Bay project still has multiple approvals to go, both federally and provincially, before it can open, but this does put the Liberal promise to the test, that they would speed up the approval process in the critical mineral space. Mackenzie Gray, Global News, Ottawa.
Alright, I think that's where we're going to call it for today. Gotta get ready and all that, so yeah, we'll have some more stuff tomorrow, hopefully. Sounds like my friend is wanting to do some training for an upcoming tournament that another one of my friends is hosting, so we'll probably do that. So yeah, tomorrow will either be origami or engage or something. Or maybe no stream. I guess we'll see. So yeah, I'll see everyone later. Till then.